all you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old Union has come in here to dwell.
A battle in the heart of Alabama caught our attention. Coal miners in one community, they've been on strike now for months.
Working as long as 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, in some of the most dangerous conditions.
I really think that the labor movement is the single greatest force for democracy in the history of the United States.
The story of Alabama is a story of not just resilience, but of militancy.
I say no contract, you say no code. No contract, no contract.
If we ain't all free, ain't none of us free.
You're listening to Alabama's only union talk radio show, The Valley Labor Report, with Adam Keller and Jacob Morrison.
Hello, Tennessee Valley. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host and fellow agitator Adam Keller, and we are broadcasting live online and on the radio from the heart of the Tennessee Valley, the Spice Radio Studio in Huntsville, Alabama. Today on the program, child labor in Alabama. We've got an AFLCIO economist to talk to us about their recent report on CEO salary ratios to workers. We talk about the unemployment situation in Alabama and more on today's program. If you want to be part of the show, we've got a phone number and the line is open. And I think that we had some gremlins in the lines last week. We weren't able to, we had a caller and we weren't able to get it, but I think Ben says we've got all the gremlins out. So we should be good to go today. You can call or text the phone number. 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. Anytime throughout the program, if you want to give us a comment, ask a question, anything like that. You can also leave a voicemail throughout the week, and we might play it on the next show. If you haven't gotten enough of us by the time that we wrap on the radio, or if you just want to see what we're up to throughout the week, then you can find us anywhere you find anything online. We are on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, wherever you find your podcasts, and newly on TikTok. Just search for The Valley Labor Report. Just a reminder, your support helps us stay on the air. Our largest single source of funding comes directly from our listeners, and we really do appreciate your support. I hate raising money. I hate raising money. I hate calling people asking for money. And it's just not fun. It's not fun at all. So the more people that individually send us $1 or $2 a month, the less of those calls I have to make. But also, we very much appreciate our union sponsors. Very, very much appreciate our union sponsors. Couldn't do it without them. But if you want to become a sustaining member of the program, you can make a one-time donation, buy our new hat, or pre-order our new shirts that we've got that say, join a union or the devil or the boss will get you. It's based on the go to church or the devil will get you sign down on 65 in Montgomery. We are really proud of it. And you can find our hat. You can find our where you can make a recurring donation or or a one-time donation on our website, TVLR.fm. TVLR.fm. And if you're a member of a union, you should get your local to sponsor the show. You can reach out to me for more details on that. So let's just jump into the show then. Last week in Southern Labor is a segment that we do every week, mostly, where we tell you what happened in the labor movement in the South. We pull the information from Jonah Furman's newsletter with his permission, Who Gets the Bird, which compiles all of the information about what's going on in the labor movement for the entire United States. So if you want to see what's going on outside the South, then you should subscribe to his newsletter at whogetsthebird.substack.com. And with that, let's jump into new organizing for the weeks of July 2nd through the 16th. There are new shops organizing with the Amazon Labor Union, including in Campbellsville, Kentucky. Very exciting about that. And outside of the Amazon Labor Union, Alex Press has a useful profile on the Garner, North Carolina union effort at an Amazon warehouse. You can also go back and listen to our interview with one of the union organizers from that plant if you would like. It's on YouTube, Facebook, and wherever you get your podcasts. 600 nurses at the Ascension Seton Medical Center in Austin, Texas are organizing with National Nurses United, which would be the biggest win in the Fort Worth region of the NLRB since 2014. 210 Starbucks workers at 9 stores, including one in Lafayette, Louisiana, have formally joined the Starbucks Workers United drive. 18 workers for Stone Products Company Oldcastle in Lylesville, North Carolina, are unionizing with Teamsters Local 171. 17 workers for Maytag Aircraft at Fort Hood, Texas, are unionizing with the Machinists Union. 14 workers for Sixt Rent-A-Car in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, are unionizing with Teamsters Local 769. 7 lab workers for Roanoke Cement Company in Troutville, Virginia, are organizing with Boilermakers Local D314. And 2 First Student School Bus Mechanics in Atlanta, Georgia, are unionizing with Teamsters Local 728. In election wins and losses in the past couple of weeks, Starbucks Workers United went 6-6 over the past 2 weeks, with 272 workers at 12 stores voting a cumulative 92-58 for the union, but none of those were in the South. 6 building engineers at the Thompson Hotel in D.C. voted 5-1 to join Operating Engineers Local 99. 60 guards at the National Gallery of Arts in Washington, D.C. are joining Protective Service Officers United. In updates on strikes and bargaining, Joe Biden has awoken from his slumber to stop a 120,000 worker rail strike that otherwise could have begun as soon as Monday morning. That this was basically totally expected by everyone involved, and that this is not a final injunction against the strike or anything but part of the unbelievably convoluted bureaucratic process that covers rail and airline union negotiations in this country. That does not make it any less true that Biden is denying over 100,000 workers their human right to withhold their labor, and we should not forget that. What happens next is Biden's Presidential Emergency Board has 30 days to make recommendations, which will then initiate another 30-day cooling-off period for the unions and freight rail carriers to consider the recommendations, at which point, a maximum of 60 days from yesterday, as we understand it, a strike could be back on the table, though most likely won't be, but the predictions game is not an easy one to win. This time around, the Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers formally authorized the strike, and at least some of the BMWE members rallied, but there was not a serious strike mobilization since everybody knew what Biden was going to do, if nothing else. We'll see if over the next 2 months the dozen other unions make formal moves, which could be an indicator of whether or not there could actually be a work stoppage. But
And last week we spoke with Mel about the railway industry and went into a little bit more detail about this contract fight and what could happen. So if you missed that, check it out from last week.
And it really helps put she really helps put a human face on what Biden is doing, on what the rail bosses are doing by just grinding rail workers to dust. I mean, it's really, really disgusting what the bosses are doing and what Biden is enabling them to do by stopping them from striking, by saying you can't go on strike right now.
And what Biden could also do through this emergency board is more or less give the unions what they're asking for, give the workers what they're asking for. And I think it's pretty clear that all of their requests could be granted, and the rail operators would still be profitable.
Of course.
So there is still opportunity for the Biden administration to come on down on the side of working class people and help these union members while also helping our supply chain.
Yeah. More and more Starbucks Workers United members are going on strike, including in Atlanta and Augusta, Georgia, in the last couple of weeks. I was at the Union Augusta location a few weeks ago while I was on a trip for work, so that's pretty cool. Would have been nice to have been able to walk the picket line with them, but happy for them. Over 270 workers from military contractor General Dynamics in Marion, Virginia, have been on strike with UAW Local 2850 for over 2.5 weeks. Maybe they can find a few pennies in the $839 billion defense bill that Congress just passed.
Maybe.
Meanwhile, a similar number of workers with Steelworkers Local 1449 at Collins Aerospace in Union, West Virginia, another military contractor, have been locked out for over 2 months. Janitors in Miami with SEIU Local 32BJ say they have been retaliated against for going on strike. Amazon workers walked off on Prime Day in Doraville, Georgia, with the fantastic slogan, "Pay us or chaos," as they pushed for a $3 an hour raise. Dollar General workers with Fight for 15 went on strike for higher wages and safer working conditions in Holly Hill, South Carolina. IWW movie theater workers at the Alamo Draft House in Austin, Texas, are pushing for recognition and walked off the job after the company fired one of their members. Transit workers in D.C. with ATU Local 689, the Amalgamated Transit Union, have authorized a strike, while St. Louis drivers apparently organized a mass sick-out with the Amalgamated Transit Union Local 788 as they try to settle a contract. Unite Here Local 23 in D.C. is still fighting for the jobs of Senate dining workers who were just hit with another round of layoffs despite congressional intervention and are now planning to start disrupting things. And they did just that last week with a demonstration that saw some congresspeople being arrested. In contract ratifications, as expected, but not by a massive margin, Teamster car haulers ratified their national deal, and Red Cross Teamsters also ratified their contract by a much larger margin. The Airline Pilots Association at United Airlines voted down their most recent contract, sending the union and the company back to the negotiating table, and Treasury Department workers with the National Treasury Employees Union are fighting over the role remote work will play in the future. Negotiations are rocky between schools and Brevard Federation of Teachers in Brevard County, Florida. And then finally, in internal union politics, the United Auto Workers Convention starts next week. Next week will mostly be about resolution fights, though with the nomination threshold so low, just the support of one delegate is required to get on the ballot. It's possible that there could be some surprise candidates. The real fun begins post-convention when candidates will have about 2 months to campaign before voting starts, and the whole thing theoretically will be wrapped up by the end of November. The stakes are extremely high as the Big Three contract expires in September of 2023, and the United Auto Workers desperately needs to pull out of its tailspin of both membership numbers and basic morale. You can read Jonah's rundown about what to expect from the convention in Labor Notes. AFGE and its Council 118, the ICE union, are parting ways with the American Federation of Government Employees, filing paperwork with the Federal Labor Relations Authority last week to remove the union from its membership after the ICE union filed a complaint with the Department of Labor. Good riddance.
Absolutely. Don't let the door hit you on the way out.
Yep.
Or maybe you should.
So let's get to some local news. This went incredibly viral last week. And it's genuinely insane news coming out of Reuters Came out yesterday, thanks to reporters Joshua Schneier, Micah Rosenberg, and Christina Cook, about child labor at the Hyundai facility in Alabama. Let's go to their report. Underage workers, in some cases as young as 12, have recently worked at a metal stamping plant operated by Smart Alabama LLC. these people said. Smart, listed by Hyundai in corporate filings as a majority-owned unit, supplies parts for some of the most popular cars and SUVs built by the automaker in Montgomery, its flagship U.S. assembly plant. And we aren't talking about kids working in kid-friendly environments either. You know, I mean, they really shouldn't be working at all or only in very limited circumstances. Kids should be learning, having fun in school, being kids. But we are not talking about kid-friendly environments. We're not talking about going down, to the family farm and milking a cow or, just some menial tasks in a safe location. That's not what's happening at this plant. A Reuters review of the records shows that Smart has been assessed with at least $48,515 in OSHA penalties since just 2013. In less than 10 years, we're talking about $50,000 in fines from OSHA, which $50,000 is not a lot, but when you think about how much OSHA can actually fine or does actually fine, especially under a Republican administration, $50,000 is a lot of money from OSHA. It indicates a big safety problem. And it was most recently filed just in the last year, in 2022. OSHA inspections at Smart have documented violations including crush and amputation hazards at the facility. Now, this is not more crazy or disgusting than the original article of children working at facilities with amputation hazards. But get this. The Attorney General's office has known about this since at least February. 5 months. 5 months Steve Marshall has known about child labor in Alabama. And his office had no comments to give to the Reuters reporters about whether or not there would be prosecutions in the case. Can you just imagine that? Having known about literal child labor in Alabama for 5 months, and that is not enough time to be able to tell reporters whether or not you're going to be doing prosecutions. Quoting from the article, Reuters learned of underage workers at the Hyundai-owned supplier following the brief disappearance in February of a Guatemalan migrant child from her family's home in Alabama. The police force in Enterprise, which is about 45 miles from the plant in Laverne, doesn't have jurisdiction to investigate possible labor law violations at the factory. Instead, the force notified the state attorney general's office after the incident. James Sanders, an Enterprise police detective, told Reuters. Mike Lewis, a spokesperson at the Alabama Attorney General's office, declined to comment. It's unclear whether the office or other investigators have contacted Smart or Hyundai about possible violations. 5 months! 5 months! They're sitting on this story for 5 months. The Attorney General's office has known about this issue for 5 months, and the only reason we know about it is because of Reuters. The only reason we know about it is because of Reuters. Let's contrast this total and complete lack of urgency, lack of moral clarity, lack of giving a damn about Hyundai exploiting children in a plant in Alabama with amputation hazards with his recent comments on Google. The Attorney General of the state of Alabama, the highest enforcer of the law in the state, unprompted, nobody asked him to do this, joined a letter with other state attorneys general who also apparently have nothing else better to do, stating that if Google does not give them the search results they want, they might sue. I mean, talk about
priorities.
I mean, good God. Talk about misplaced priorities. What about abortion? What's his urgency been like on this issue? Well, according to Parker Snyder, yet another columnist for Koch-funded, flat earth, military coup, crypto bro boosting propaganda outlet 1819 News, Around 9:15 a.m. on Friday, June 24th, news of the court's decision in Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization overruling Roe v. Wade reached Alabama. At 10:37 a.m., Alabama Attorney General Steve Marshall released a statement promising that his office was immediately filing motions to dissolve any injunctions against, quote, pro-life bills held up in the court system. These would have to be dissolved before pro-life measures could go into effect in Alabama. It took 82 minutes. 82 minutes. Less than 2 hours for him to jump into action to ensure that the law that will force children in Alabama to carry incest, rape, pregnancies to term, to use the force of the state to impose his religious views on the bodies of others, less than 82 minutes for him to jump into action to enforce that policy. Yet after 5 months, almost half a year, they did not have a position that they could tell the press on the issue of child labor in a plant with rampant safety issues, to include amputation hazards, much less having actually done anything about this specific issue or anything proactively to ensure safe working conditions for adults and to ensure enforcement of child labor law for minors. After 5 months, they had nothing that they could tell the press. Nothing at all.
It's just ridiculous.
And of course, like, I do want to make clear, just so that you, the listener, don't get the idea that this is some crazy idea that actually it's somebody else's jurisdiction to enforce child labor laws or anything else like that it's not in his wheelhouse, or even that there is no precedent. There absolutely is. I want to share this from you. Terry Gerstein for the Economic Policy Institute last year put together a really good report on how district attorneys and state attorneys general are fighting for workers. And in this case, children. She reports that state and local prosecutors have been bringing charges in a range of cases, including wage theft, misclassification of workers as independent contractors, payroll fraud, failure to pay unemployment insurance taxes, workers' compensation insurance fraud, labor trafficking, egregious workplace safety and health violations, workplace sexual assault, witness tampering, and retaliation. And we aren't just seeing these cases in a handful of places either. We're seeing them in California, Colorado, Massachusetts, Michigan, Minnesota, Montana, New Jersey, New York, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, Texas, Virginia, Washington. This isn't just out there kooky liberal stuff enforcing the law, enforcing laws that protect workers. And some jurisdictions are even going a step further in creating separate departments solely for worker protections, like San Diego DA Summer Stefan in 2021, like Queens DA Melinda Katz, like San Francisco DA Chesa Boudin in 2020, like Philadelphia DA Larry Krasner in 2019. Yet here in Alabama, a literal child labor case can sit in the Attorney General's office for 5 months and nobody know about it and nothing be done about it. It's insane.
It is, and like you said, it's a reflection of the priorities that we have from the Attorney General's office, and I think it really speaks to Alabama's issues in terms of law enforcement on behalf of working class people, and on behalf of children. We have child labor laws for a reason. We have minimum wage laws and overtime laws for a reason.
Right.
But those laws are only as good as they are enforced. And it's very clear that the state of Alabama has no interest in enforcing any laws that might actually help ordinary working people. Now, as you said, like, they will rush to go get their name in the press, to go get their name on Fox News, to jump into the latest controversy. It took, less than 90 minutes to get involved in the abortion issue as soon as the Supreme Court made their decision. But you can't do anything about children literally risking their life and limb right in your backyard. I mean, this is in the Montgomery area.
Yeah.
It's not even the other part of the state here.
He could probably walk to the place.
Right.
It would be a little bit of a trek. But apparently he doesn't have anything else better to do because he's getting ready to sue Google because it's not giving him the search results he wants. Right. So he's got the time, clearly.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was just so many issues that came up when you read this article from Reuters. And if you haven't read it yet, I just can't recommend it enough. But it speaks to the issues with our Attorney General, as you just laid out. It speaks to the lack of law enforcement when it comes to labor law. And our labor law, as we've discussed frequently on this show, is not sufficient. It is not good enough for working class people in this country. But even what we do have is insufficiently enforced. It speaks to the role of temp agencies in these sort of settings, because, of course, Hyundai is going to push the blame off to the temporary staffing agency that they claim they were using here, that brought these children in as workers. And anyone who's familiar with the auto industry or the auto parts supply chain industry knows that these temp staff agencies are a huge presence. And folks are often kind of told about, oh, we've got a new Toyota plant, we've got a new Hyundai plant, there's all these good jobs that are coming.
Right.
And then lo and behold, many of those people are actually funneled through staffing agencies where the work is temporary, it's precarious, it doesn't get the same amount of pay or benefits that the full-time folks are getting. And the use of these staffing agencies presents a major problem when it comes to situations like this, where an employer isn't even verifying who the hell they're employing.
Right. In the Reuters report, and Adam, we got a comment that says your audio is very quiet, but they can hear me, so maybe work on that. But the in the Reuters report, the they talk about how they asked Hyundai for a comment, and Hyundai said something to the effect of, oh, we follow the law, blah, 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 and basically we expect our contractors to also follow the law. And it shows exactly, when you've got a 12-year-old girl working in your facility, that's not something that you can just say like, oh, well, I didn't know, I expected my contract. Like, you can just literally look and see.
Somebody knew.
Yes. Somebody knew. And in the report, they talked to several workers who said they worked with dozens of minors in this facility. So this was clearly an issue. This was clearly an issue that these Reuters investigators, who are not paid by the state of Alabama, were able to find out. And yet, the Alabama Attorney General has known about this for 5 months. And nothing. We're not seeing anything about arrests of the bosses at this plant. We're not seeing anything about fines. We're not seeing anything about civil penalties. Nothing. Nothing at all from politicians in Montgomery about this. And of course, the second that workers try to come together and fix it themselves, politicians in Montgomery either would be absent or actively opposed to their organization.
Yeah, and one last thing I wanted to say on this is like, this is just another example of why it's so important that we have solidarity with our migrant brothers and sisters, because we see where immigrants are hyper-exploited and where employers use their precarious situations, their lack of legal status in some cases, their poverty status, their refugee status. Employers prey upon folks who are fleeing often terrible situations in their home countries and risking their lives to come over here to the United States just to try to make a better life for themselves.
Right.
And I know that there are those in the right-wing media who would love to divide and conquer working class people and love to have native-born Americans, pitted against migrants. But the way forward is through solidarity and recognizing that it doesn't do us any good as American workers to have other workers who are preyed upon because of their immigration status. At the end of the day, we're all in this together. We're all trying to sell our labor in order to survive, and we're all facing exploitation and oppression. So I think I just wanted to emphasize that before we move on from this story, is that it's very, very important that we not allow ourselves to be divided by immigration.
Right.
The employers love to bring people over that they can exploit and that they can use the threat of ICE and deportation against, that they can silence. And the key, the task for us in the labor movement is to organize, is to organize these workers, to bring them into our movement and join together in solidarity.
Right. Yeah, these employers, they don't want open borders. They want borders just open enough that people can come in, but not so open that they have rights.
Right.
They want people to be able to come in without rights that they can exploit, and that if they get too uppity, they can call ICE
and deport their entire family.
Yeah, and deport their entire family and be thugs for the boss, which is basically, especially under the Trump administration, what ICE was more or less reduced to: thugs for the boss.
Yeah, and even for more white collar workers, when you're talking about visas.
Right.
Employer
totally dependent.
visas.
Yeah, totally dependent on the employer.
So the immigration system is not set up to be beneficial for the immigrants themselves or for American workers either.
Right. Yeah, definitely doesn't help us.
It's for the benefit of bosses.
Yeah. So just really, really, really disgusting story out of Alabama, out of Montgomery.
Yet again,
and,
the state of Alabama making national news for a disgrace.
Yeah.
We deserve better leaders in this state.
Yeah. A few people in the chat, Jeb says, rather than direct hiring, these suppliers also use third-party staffing agencies, often classified as independent contractors, just to skirt labor laws and keep themselves off the radar. That's exactly what happened here.
And when something bad happens like this, when they get caught,
point the finger.
They can pass the buck.
Yeah.
Blame it on a staffing agency instead of taking accountability for their own actions.
Yeah, and these aren't this thing isn't happening at union plants. Strom says, I'm honestly not that surprised. Southern automobile parts suppliers are nightmares. Look at how BMW contracts hiring out to MAU in South Carolina. People working as, quote, temps for several years.
Mm-hmm.
Strom also says the Nissan plant in Canton, Mississippi has some crazy stuff like that going on too. Yeah. Just really disgusting stuff. So we're going to go ahead and go to a break, though, and when we come back, we will be on the we will have on the line Brandon Reese, economist from the AFL-CIO, talking about their recent Pay Watch report. You're listening to the Valley Labor Report. We will be right back.
Hometown Action is a grassroots organization building a multiracial, working-class movement for racial, gender, economic, and environmental justice in Alabama's rural communities. We stand in solidarity with Alabama workers and are proud to support the Valley Labor Report's efforts to inform and build the Southern worker movement. Please visit hometownaction.org and follow our social media channels at Hometown Action to learn more about how you too can get involved to make the South a better place for all workers. Solidarity, y'all.
IBW 558 is like a great football team. You've got to have the aptitude, skills, and knowledge to outperform the competition. If you're a non-union electrician, now is the perfect time to get off the sideline and join our team. We have the absolute best wages and benefit package in North Alabama and Southern Tennessee. It's because our team stands together, bargains together, and our families benefit from it. With immediate openings, you have the opportunity to see why the IBEW is the right choice.
Energy Alabama is a locally operated and membership-based nonprofit organization focused on advancing Alabama's clean energy future through education and advocacy. Many people in charge of infrastructure and building decisions simply don't know about how viable clean and renewable energy is. To that end, Energy Alabama has provided instruction to more than thousands of adults and tens of thousands of K-12 students across the state. We're working hard to build careers in clean energy and help everyday Alabamians save money on their utility bills. Learn more about our work and how you can join us at energyalabama.org.
Support for the Valley Labor Report comes from the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers Union. Learn more by visiting www.ifpte.org.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for this program comes from the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 136 out of Central Alabama. Learn more at IBEW136.org.
Attention union members, membership organizations, podcasters, or anyone with a payment processing need. The future is here, and your organization needs to be prepared by working with Unionly. With Unionly, your union or organization can take payments on a mobile device, eliminating processing fees, giving you a better price than other payment processing methods, while at the same time supporting a union-friendly business with a specialized skill set to meet your needs. Your members will thank you when they pay their dues at their convenience without waiting in line to deposit cash or check. Start preparing for the future today by calling 206-595-8631 or visiting unionly.io.
It's that time of year again. Christmas in July. Monday, July 25th at 305 8th Street. Christmas in December is when we receive the gifts that we wish for. Christmas in July at 305 is a time to address residents' needs. Clothing, socks, underwear, bedding, and more. Or maybe just a treat or two thrown in for fun. To add to the fun, individually wrap each item. A needs list for each resident will be provided. Email CYDNEY at 305-8thstreet.org. Call 256-777-9642.
Come all you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Labor creates all wealth should go to labor, and you are listening to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, and my co-host is Adam Keller. If you've got anything to add, give us a call. The phone number is 844-899-TVLR. We've got a new sponsor this week, and I didn't have time to pre-tape the ad, so I'm just going to go ahead and give that to you here. So, are you looking for a better future, a career that can set you up for life, and to be a part of something that's bigger than yourself? Then consider a skilled trades apprenticeship with the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. IUPAT. The work of IUPAT is all around us, from the industrial painters who work on bridges to drywall finishers, floor coverers, the glaziers who install the glass in our skylines, and so much more. With an IUPAT apprenticeship, you earn while you learn and receive benefits while learning the trade, including a pension. You're not going to get that with a non-union contractor. We provide world-class education free of charge. That's right, no student debt. Our starting salaries for apprentices that graduate is above the national median salary with benefits for entire families. And you have the flexibility to take your trade wherever you'd like in the country to work. IUPAT District Council 77 covers our entire region, so give Adam Booth a call at 205-603-3142 for more information. That is Adam Booth at 205-603-3142. 888-848-9242. Come build a better future with us and join IUPAT today. Really excited having them on the show.
Absolutely. Thanks to our painters. We love you.
Yep.
And we appreciate you.
And we appreciate everybody's support that helps makes this show a possibility. So every year, the AFLCIO, the largest federation of unions in North America, does a report on executive and worker pay. This year, we've got their economist, Brandon Reese, on to talk to us about it. Brandon, thank you for taking the time to talk to us. I appreciate it.
Hey, Jacob. Thanks for having me. It's a great pleasure to speak with you today. And on behalf of the AFL-CIO, I want to express our solidarity with our brothers and sisters, both at Warrior Met Coal, who've been on strike for over a year now against corporate greed, and also at Amazon and Bessemer, who've been fighting to form a union. Your struggle for economic fairness is our struggle.
Absolutely, and that's the spirit with which the AFL-CIO is formed. Unions coming together across trades, across regions, across crafts to support each other, and so we appreciate that, and I know that they do as well. So the Pay Watch report. Talk to us about what y'all are trying to do with this report that y'all do every year.
Yeah, so our Executive Pay Watch website, which is available at paywatch.org, that's www.paywatch.org, tracks CEO pay and the ratio of CEO to employee pay at public companies. We've got almost all Russell 3000 companies available on our website. And last year, in 2021, CEOs of S&P 500 companies received on average $18.3 million in total compensation. That was an 18.2% increase over the previous year. And as a result, the average pay ratio increased from 324 to 1 in 2021, up from 299 the previous year. Since the pandemic started in 2020, CEO pay and the pay ratio between CEO and median worker pays increased 23%.
That's wild. That is really wild. And all of this talk about wages driving inflation, while wages for working people is not even meeting inflation, much less exceeding it, which you would presume it would have to at least meet inflation to be driving it, while executive pay is tripling inflation, almost tripling, at least doubling inflation. That's insane.
Right. That's what we mean when we talk about greedflation. Runaway CEO pay is a symptom of greedflation when companies increase prices to boost corporate profits. So the Economic Policy Institute has calculated that corporate profits account for half of all recent price increases. And what does that mean for workers? Well, so with every price increase in the cost of rent, food, gasoline, we experience as a pay cut. So while CEO pay and corporate profits increased more than twice as fast as the rate of inflation in 2021 at 7%, nominal worker wages only rose 4.7%. So after inflation, real wages actually fell 2.4%, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And that's why you have this growing gulf in inequality and an increase between CEO and median worker pay up to 324 to 1 last year.
And that was the average of from the reports, 324 to 1.
That's right. That's the average for S&P 500 companies. And the company with the S&P 500 company with the highest pay ratio, no surprise, was Amazon, where its CEO, Andrew Jassy, received an astounding $212 million in total compensation in 2021. That's up nearly 500% compared to the previous year. So Amazon's median employee received less than $33,000 last year, giving Amazon the highest pay ratio in the S&P 500 of 6,474 to 1.
Wow. That's pretty
hard to imagine. Many lifetimes of work and of pay in just 1 year.
I mean, it would take an Amazon. I mean, the simple translation of that is that it would take an Amazon employee 6,400 years to make what Andrew Jassy did in 1 year.
That's right. That's right. So, what our concern is that CEOs have been raking in compensation, windfall compensation amounts, in part because of the inflationary economy. They've been increasing prices and to increase profits, which is hurting working people's pocketbooks. And it's CEOs, not working people, who are causing inflation. CEO pay increased at more than twice the rate of inflation, whereas worker wages actually fell last year, meaning that CEO pay is contributing to inflation. Workers' wages are holding back inflation. So if we're going to fix our economy and restore balance, we need to find real solutions to tackle inflation by going after corporate price gouging, by fixing supply chain disruptions, ending the pandemic, and helping working people cope with rising prices by raising wages.
How is it, you think, that the corporate media, that people on talk radio, that they are being so successful in driving the narrative that inflation is high because working people had it too good? Because that's basically the gist of it, right? Is that working people, their raises have been too high. We got too much money from during the pandemic in stimulus checks and unemployment while we were trying to survive. And that this is the narrative from, it seems, MSNBC to Fox News and Newsmax is that is the reason for inflation, that working people simply had it too good, and we've got to rein some of that back in. We've got to bring working people down a peg in order to address inflation. How is it that this narrative has so much legs when working people, like, we know that we haven't had it too good. We've seen our wages decrease as it relates to the cost of living. We have not seen enormous improvements to our quality of life.
We didn't get 500% increases, like
right?
Some people.
Yeah, that's exactly right. For the past year, we've heard corporate CEOs and Wall Street elites complain that they're having difficulty filling low-wage jobs. But the problem with our economy is not that too many people have jobs. The problem with our economy is economic inequality. And runaway CEO pay is a symptom of a system that's out of balance, in which corporate profits have been off the chart. Last year, corporate profits were up 17% for the S&P 500. That is a record increase. And so if we're going to solve inflation, the solution is not to cause a recession that's going to put working people out of their jobs. The solution is a workers first agenda, and that's what we're calling on, to provide real solutions to help working people cope with rising prices, reducing the cost of prescription drug prices, investing in childcare, investing in education, real solutions that can help create a broad-based prosperity, not an economic recession, which is just going to magnify economic inequality by hurting working people and putting us out of our jobs. So that's what I think we as a labor movement need to be doing, pointing the blame for price rises on corporate price gouging and the CEOs who benefit from that.
And you know, when you say pointing the blame, it's not pointing the blame in a made up sense. It's accurately describing what is happening. The proposition that you say, the position that the labor movement needs to have is to accurately describe the real world, where 50% of the increases in prices that we're seeing in retail goods is going to profit. That means 50% of that is going to, supply chain issues. Perhaps some of it is going to increased wages. Some of it is, the 50% of it can be explained by, legitimate things that's going on in the economy, which most of it is, as I understand it, is the supply chain. It's not that workers have had it too good. Even this 50% that is legitimately explained, it's that there are huge supply chain issues that are caused by the just-in-time production and shipping model that we have got in this country and across the world that does not allow for any type of buffer at all. But then the other 50% of it is just going into rich people's pockets. And so, to create the solution, we've got to properly understand what the problem is. And I think that that's important. And I
think that's the value in a report like this, because it can actually lay it all out there for you with the facts and figures, with the numbers, to see what's really going on here. And I think it's worth remembering when we talk about inflation, who actually raises prices? We don't.
Right.
We don't have control over that. The three of us don't get to press a button that makes prices go up.
Well, and you know who pushes that button? CEOs. They're the ones who set prices, and their compensation is incentivizing short-term decisions. They want to maximize profits over the short term rather than expanding production, creating new jobs, innovating to satisfy customer demand. They're taking advantage of today's inflationary economy to boost prices and gouge consumers. Let me give you an example from Alabama about that. At Warrior Met Coal last year, the CEO received $5.7 million in total compensation. That's more than a 30% increase in his pay compared to the previous year. What happened to Warrior Met Coal's production? It fell off a cliff because the company would not settle a strike by its unionized members and members of the United Mine Workers of America. Meanwhile, median worker pay at the company fell 70% because of that strike that management would not settle. That increased Warrior Met's CEO to worker pay ratio from 42-1 in 2020 to 182-1 in 2021. He got a pay increase. Production fell. Workers were out of work, and production fell, which actually increased inflation and provided less product for the company's customers. So what's going on here? Our economy is out of balance. It's not working, and we need to. The solution is not to cause a recession. The solution is not for higher interest rates that Wall Street elites are calling for. It's to invest in the real economy, to fix supply chains, to invest in clean energy. And so that's why we're calling for a workers' first agenda to build a better America. And to join us, you can visit our website, www.paywatch.org, to sign up and learn more about runaway CEO pay.
Yep. Brandon, I think that was a great place to end it. Do you have anything else that you wanted to share from the report?
I would just add that the ratio of CEO to worker pay is critical because it indicates whether the CEO is taking the lion's share of pay or whether it's spread out in a egalitarian approach across the entire company's workforce. And we have to remember, companies is a collaboration between labor and capital. We're producing products, and to be successful, companies need to be investing in their workforce. And when you have a runaway CEO pay in a high pay ratio, it indicates that companies are not investing in their workers. They're investing in the CEO. And that's a recipe for disaster, which we need to avoid. So I really appreciate your attention to runaway CEO pay and the greedflation economy that we're struggling with, and look forward to hearing the rest of your show.
Brandon Reese is an economist with the AFLCIO. You can read more of their Paywatch report at www.paywatch.org. Brandon, thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Adam, it looks like we've got a caller. What is the area code that they're calling from?
All right, give me just a sec here. And we have a caller from 267.
267.
All right,
let's
so let's see if I can bring on our caller at 267.
Yeah, and while you're trying to bring that caller out, we got a few comments from the last section. Penelope in the YouTube chat says, at my company, the CEO annual compensation is 650 times that of the median employee salary. Strom says, stimulus checks, federal unemployment subsidies. How about those damned PPP loans? That's exactly
yes.
right. Yeah.
In fact, we ought to do a segment on that.
We really should. And Joe Rogan, who was talking about how people got lazy over the pandemic, he took an extraordinary amount of PPP loans. The number that I've got in my head is 2 million, but you might want to fact check that. It might have been 200,000, but 2 million is what sticks out. But it was a lot.
There was a lot of grifting, in the PPP loans.
D. Alessandro says 640 times 6,400 times a poverty wage of $33,000. How much more can workers take? And he also says workers' first agenda after 150 years of capitalism. That seems like a truly forlorn hope. Indeed. Ron says, but doesn't the Amazon CEO work 6,000 times as hard? Please be fair to the exploited CEOs. We want to be fair and balanced here on the Valley Labor Report, and we want to make sure that we are fair to the exploited
obviously
CEOs.
He worked 500% harder than he did the year
before. Right, obviously.
Yeah.
Charles Ghost, no, that wasn't related. Ron also says no one would do the strenuous work of CEOing unless they got paid 6,000 times as much. And Strom says to Ron, they don't even have time to eat or sleep. They are working thousands of hours out of every 168-hour week.
Yeah.
That's exactly
there
right.
You go.
So have we got the caller on the line now?
I believe so.
Yeah, it's infinite.
All right.
Infinite content.
Caller from a 267 area code, is that what you said?
Mm-hmm.
Caller 267 area code,
content.
What's your name? Where are you calling from?
It's infinite content from Philly.
This is who from Philly?
Infinite content.
Infinite content from Philly. What you got?
Okay, so we know that the Starbucks workers are unionizing all across the nation, and they set up down in Center City a Scabby the Rat blow up, and you know Scabby is all about workers, like companies trying to use scab work to break unions.
Mm-hmm.
I am so happy that these workers, even though that Starbucks is a temporary work thing for most people, but I'm glad that these younger people are getting the mind state of unionizing, because when they move to their next bigger and better places, they're going to have this ingrained in their heads. Now,
Absolutely, and we talked to the Scottsboro workers last week, and one of them was 16 years old, and she was like, I don't anticipate making this a career, but my generation is just beginning to get into the workforce, and I want to be fighting so that when we do get into the workforce, it's a better world than it is now, that the jobs are better than they are now. And the only way to do that is exactly what these Starbucks workers are doing, exactly what Trader Joe's workers are doing, Chipotle workers are doing. And there was some place that the nationwide workers are getting like a $10 an hour raise after one location unionized. And I cannot remember the company.
I thought that was Trader Joe's.
Was it Trader Joe's that got a $10 an hour raise? Maybe that was it.
Now, I'm not certain of that place. That's escaping me. But what Howard Schultz is setting himself up for is not just the Labor Department to come drop the hammer on him for one thing, but he's for his union busting. But also he's like, well, I'll give benefits to people who are non-unionized, but I won't give them to the unionized people. I'm like, oh, so you want to set up a whole class action lawsuit for you for discrimination and benefit issues? Am I wrong, or am I just seeing that.
No, I
Howard
think
Schultz-
you're exactly
you're
right
definitely
there.
on the you're definitely on the right track, I think, and Infinite Content will answer your question, and we'll go ahead and let you go. We appreciate your call.
All right, have a good one.
Yep.
Thank you so much.
And thanks for the call. And but yes, I don't know that class action lawsuit is going to be the way that it goes, but they are definitely
through
setting
NLRB.
Yes, definitely. There are going to be lots of complaints and hopefully lots of action from the NLRB while it is still under the stewardship of Jennifer Abruzzo. They have already been hit with over 200 violations of labor law in Western New York alone, and and they continue to break the law. They continue to have total disrespect for their workers, and they're definitely setting themselves up for some legal action, at least through the NLRB. But unfortunately, with the reactionary activist Supreme Court that we've got right now, who knows what is going to be the ultimate fallout from that as far as the legal side goes.
Right.
So
we can't rely on the courts.
We
It's
can't
gonna
rely
take
on
people power.
Exactly. We can't rely on the courts. The way to actually rein in their power is exactly what the Starbucks workers are doing right now, which is organizing store after store after store until every single Starbucks in the country is union, and until you can't get a cup of coffee from a Starbucks without it being from a union barista. That is how workers at Starbucks are going to be able to rein the CEO in. And that is how workers at every company in the world, in the country and in the world, are going to be able to make a better world for themselves, their families, and their communities, is organizing for themselves. Certainly there are paths that we can take in the legal system, but that's not going to be, but we can't rely on that, certainly.
Right. And one thing I wanted to say, I understand the caller's point about Starbucks being typically, a temporary kind of job, often for younger folks. But someone has to make the coffee.
Right.
Right? Someone has to stock the shelves at the grocery store. Someone has to do these jobs. And why can't they be careers? There's, as far as I'm concerned, there's just as much value in that as there are any of the other jobs out there that people, perceive as more, lifetime careers. Mm-hmm. So, to me, I think what they're doing is trying to make Starbucks a better place to work, whether that's just for a couple years while you're, in college, or while you're working through school, or whatever the situation may be.
Right.
Maybe
it can be a career.
Maybe you, with just cause protections, with retirement benefits, with a solid union contract, Starbucks can be a place where you
right.
Work for many years, and frankly, that benefits Starbucks to have a seasoned workforce that is very experienced, that gets better and better at their job.
Seen that. We saw it benefit UPS during the pandemic, actually. While FedEx and all these other delivery companies were struggling to keep themselves staffed, UPS was able to, because of their union contract, because they paid people more and they actually have benefits and everything, they did not have as much of a problem staffing.
Right.
And they saw their profits increase because they were able to continue making deliveries on time, where FedEx and other places floundered. And I did just want to go back and say that it was Trader Joe's, Adam. From More Perfect Union, they report facing a wave of unionization. Trader Joe's announced this week it is raising pay by $10 an hour on Sundays, including and increasing sick time and bumping pay rates at stores nationwide. Workers in Hadley, Massachusetts will vote on becoming the first unionized Trader Joe's in the country next week.
And we've talked about that a lot, on how unions and union organizing actually raises wages and benefits for non-union workers, because sometimes just the threat alone is enough to get companies to start moving and actually coming off some money. So way to go, Trader Joe's workers. Really, I think you're making a difference already, and you're getting the goods.
Yeah, exactly. Folks, we're going to go to a break, and we will be right back. We're going to talk some about the unemployment situation in Alabama and the culture war, so don't change the channel. You are listening to the Valley Labor Report.
Energy Alabama supports consumers and is a leader in advocating for them. We have been able to successfully fight off utility rate increases in the state, reduce fees for electric vehicles, increase electric vehicle infrastructure spending, and secured a $100 million refund by Alabama Power after the utility overcharged customers for fuel. To learn more about our work advocating for customers and join the fight, go to energyalabama.org.
There's a lot of talk about a shortage of workers, but that's not the case with IBEW 558. We have provided our customers over 3,000 workers and performed over 3 million man-hours in a pandemic year. With 8,000 OJT hours, 900 classroom hours, OSHA 30, and a state license, our members receive the equivalent of a master's degree. That's what makes IBEW 558 the right choice for your electrical needs. Look us up at Facebook or at IBEW558.org.
North Alabama DSA is looking for folks to work for a better North Alabama. They prioritize mutual aid, municipal activism, and union solidarity. Contact them on social media or dsanorthalabama@gmail for more information.
Support for this program is provided by the International Association for Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local Lodge 44 in Decatur, Alabama. Learn more at iamaw44.org.
Hometown Action is a grassroots organization building a multiracial working class movement for racial, gender, economic, and environmental justice in Alabama's rural communities. We stand in solidarity with Alabama workers and are proud to support the Valley Labor Report's efforts to inform and build the Southern worker movement. Please visit hometownaction.org and follow our social media channels at Hometown Action to learn more about how you too can get involved to make the South a better place for all workers. Solidarity, y'all.
Support for this program also comes from the Iron Workers, Local 477. So if you are looking for contractors with lower than average EMR and TRIR, they tell me that if you need to know what those mean, then you will. Or if you need to supplement a workforce at any level for any amount of time, short or long term, if you need iron workers that come trained and certified at no extra cost, or if you need workers from superintendent down to general laborer, and you're looking to start work on a project, or you're unhappy with your current contractor situation, you need to call my friend Jeb Miles with the Ironworkers Local 477. They only work with the best in the business, vetted contractors, and can do all kinds of jobs from roofing to steel and bridge erection, from welding to heavy rigging, from structural repairs to machinery alignment, and much more. They supply manpower on 4 of the 5 largest projects in North Alabama, so you know they're legit. If you need good quality, safe, efficient, diligent, and knowledgeable workers on your job, then you need the Ironworkers Local 477. Call Jeb Miles at 256-383-3334 or via email at local477@bellsouth.net, and make sure you tell them that you heard about them on the Valley Labor Report.
We're the nurses, firefighters, and claims representatives that help keep our government services running. We respond to natural disasters. We care for our nation's veterans, and we investigate discrimination in the workplace. We are federal and D.C. government workers, and we are proud to serve the American people. Working in more than 70 agencies across the government, we know we can fulfill our mission because our union has our back. Learn more at AFGE.org. Paid for by the American Federation of Government Employees, AFLCIO.
Support for this program also comes from the Mid-South Council of Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union. Learn more at rwdsu.info.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Alabama's only union talk radio show. This is the Valley Labor Report. Radio that talks back to the boss. My name is Jacob Morrison, and my co-host is Adam Keller. If you've got anything to add, you can give us a call or text us at our phone number, 844-899-TVLR.
Send us a text.
Send us a text.
We like that.
And we'll read it.
Tell us your bad boss stories. Tell us about some of the bizarre things that your HR department does. Yeah. We enjoy those.
I was And that line, by the way, came from the Heartland Labor Forum, radio that talks back to the boss.
I love that.
KKFI. Yeah, I liked that a lot, so I figured I would use it. I listened to their recent interview with Max Alvarez about his book. You can check that out at kkfi.org.
Are they out in Iowa? Is that right?
Kansas.
I think. Kansas. That's right.
Isn't
yeah.
it Kansas?
Yeah,
I think it's Kansas.
Got a chance to hear from them at the Labor Notes conference, and really impressed with the work they do.
Yes, Judy Ansell's great. She's been doing the Heartland Labor Forum for like 20 or 30 years. It's really, really cool. But yeah, speaking about HR, I was at a party the other day, and I ran into this person that worked at HR. Have I told this story on the radio? I don't know if I have or not. But I ran into this person that works in HR, and we were drinking and talking, and she asked me what I do, and I told her, my job, and that I'm a union activist. I'm a union steward. And she was like, "Oh, I work in HR or something." Something about like you wouldn't like what I do. It took her a while before she actually told me that she worked in HR. And I was like, "Oh no, that's terrible." And she was like, "Yeah, she went through. She wanted to go into HR because she actually like wanted to help people, and she went through college." Being indoctrinated this whole time, talking about, all of her professors and all of these people are telling her like, "Oh yeah, you're going to be able to help so many people being in HR. You're going to be able to be a workers advocate and, all this stuff."
A resource for humans. Maybe.
Yes, a resource for humans that work at your company. But she said the reality of it is that all that I ever do is give people termination notices, tell them that they can't have their raises, and deliver bad news that they're not going to have health care anymore and stuff like that. And she was like, "I really hate it, and it's really depressing, and I and I've been in and out of the industry because it's so like she said it's apparently just so mentally taxing for her to have
and soul crushing
and legitimately soul crushing. She said for years she worked as a bartender because of how bad her job made her feel like as a person. And then this company now that she works for, like, apparently offered her so much money that she was able to get over that. But it's like, it's really, really, it is really sad. The things that HR does to people. So, people that work in HR, if you do actually want to be a resource for humans, you should work for a union. So yeah.
Leave the dark side of management. Come on over to the light.
Yeah. Infinite Content says in the YouTube chat, "Sorry for the choppy call. I have so many thoughts in my head. I have collisions in the middle train." And absolutely not. It was a great call. I appreciate you calling all the way from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Maybe you can talk to us about Fetterman sometime.
Yeah, and next time, definitely snap a pic of Scabby the Rat for us.
Yes.
I've never got to see. I don't think I've ever seen Scabby the Rat in person.
I've never seen Scabby the Rat in the wild. No,
so
that's unfortunate.
That would be great.
William Pena says, "During the pandemic, it was a freaking mess at UPS. Worse than peak season. We had packages piled high inside. Never seen anything like that." That's happening right now at the Postal Service. I was talking to one of their stewards here with one of the letter carrier's postal stewards here in Huntsville. He said it's a mess. It is a mess here in Huntsville.
Oh, yeah.
That they have, get this, hundreds of grievances. In Huntsville, at the Huntsville location, the Madison Post Office. It's crazy. We're going to talk to them about that sometime.
Well, and it's been years in the works, obviously, coming all the way from D.C., all the way down.
From DeJoy.
The fact that they shut down the facility up here so that all the mail in North Alabama has to go down to Birmingham and then back up. If I send you a letter from Athens to Decatur, it's got to go to Birmingham. It's just... This is what happens when folks sabotage a public sector industry.
Yeah, that's exactly right. He goes on to say the company was using personal vehicle drivers to clean up the mess, non-union people. That's going to end. There we go. Really excited. I've been talking to the Teamsters here locally, and we're going to be getting them on the program to talk some about the upcoming contract negotiations in 2023 with UPS. So that's going to be really fun. Let's go back to Alabama. let's talk about this unemployment thing. AL.com has some good reporting on the issue of unemployment in the state. And, we all know that during 2020, unemployment skyrocketed for a short time, meaning more people than ever were getting unemployment benefits. And actually, if we'll recall, there was a lot of issues about people getting their unemployment at the time, and some Republican lawmakers tried to make this big anti-government, anti-bureaucrat deal about it, right?
Even though, this has happened under their watch, under their funding choices, under their personnel choices. But, all that aside.
And I remembered this because it was so, I remembered covering this over 2 years ago now, because it was so frustrating seeing these lawmakers try to place the blame on a world historic, on responding to a world historic health event on just regular ass government workers. And so let's take a listen. Let's do a little throwback and take a listen to what we were saying on this program 2 years ago as they were trying to kick up a stink about unemployment.
There was about half a dozen Alabama lawmakers from the state house that decided to go on an unprompted fact-finding mission is what they called it. And they stormed the Alabama Department of Labor. And, ostensibly they were like concerned about their constituents that were not receiving their unemployment benefits that they were supposed to be getting. And so they wanted to go in here and see what's happening in this government bureaucracy, all these lazy public employees not working for Alabamians. That's what they wanted to go in and find. That's what they wanted to go in and find. They hate public institutions, and they want more than anything to be able to tear them down. But anyway, what they found was a building full of dedicated public servants getting more work done faster than at any time in the history of the agency, with a third of the staff that it had 10 years ago. A third of the staff. They have sent out more payments in the last 2 months. The Alabama Department of Labor, the good public servants down at the Alabama Department of Labor have sent out more payments for unemployment claims in the last 2 months with 80 employees than they have in the last several years. And this is with a third of the staff that it had in 2010. In 2010, it had 240 employees. Now they have 80. They're doing more work than they ever have in the history of the agency, faster with a third of the staff.
So that's what was happening back then. And we don't need to lose sight of that. And of course, back then, there were people that were going. I was one of those people that I had people in my life that had to get on unemployment, and it was a laborious process, and it took a long time to be able to get in touch with anybody, and it was very frustrating. But whose fault is that? It's not the people that work at the DOL. It's not their fault. And so obviously there were problems, but we need to understand where the problems are coming from. And instead of shoring up the Department of Labor then with necessary resources and staffing, they have continued to allow it to languish. Listen to this from AL.com's recent article. Quote, Alabama saw a whopping 580% increase in claims between May of 2019 and May of 2020. The department stated in a filing in a lawsuit, Alabama received 1.4 million unemployment claims since April of 2020, and 1.1 were COVID-related. 1.1 million were COVID-related, according to the Department of Labor. Yet, 2 years later, as of April 2022, over 12,000 appeals still have not been heard. And wait times in Alabama were longer than anywhere else in the country in 2021, according to the Century Foundation's analysis of federal data from August of last year. In Alabama,
yet another list where we're at the bottom.
Yeah, yet another list. And think about this, 1.1 million unemployment claims being done by 80 people. By people that you could fit in like 2 classrooms. 1.4 million. 80 people. In Alabama, the average appeal case was pending 566 days at the Department of Labor, nearly twice as long as the second most delayed state, Georgia, where appeals were pending 367 days on average. In Kansas, cases pended an average of just 15 days, and in Utah, just 19 days. And they do a good job of underscoring the human tolls that these debts are having on people. Here are a couple of examples. Quote from the article, "For Martin, it only got worse when the state sent her a bill in the spring of 2021 saying she needed to pay back $15,000. She took a second job at a grocery store that pays $10 an hour. The law firm she works for full-time only pays $9 an hour. She works more than 60-hour weeks and spends her evenings at the grocery store standing on a prosthetic leg." Edward Terry, 51, drove for Uber in Birmingham when Alabama shut down in 2020. His customer base disappeared from the streets and he filed for unemployment. Last year, Terry got a letter from the state saying he owes them $7,299 of those benefits. He sent an appeal and said he hasn't heard from anyone. And to add to this frustration, all of this is totally unnecessary. It's totally gratuitous suffering being inflicted on the working people of Alabama. In 2021, the federal Department of Labor gave states permission to completely waive overpayment debts for people who got unemployment during the pandemic. Some states, like Massachusetts, Florida, and New Jersey, are recognizing the burden of thousands of dollars in surprise debt following the economic disruptions of a global pandemic and are forgiving the overpayments. Alabama is not offering blanket forgiveness. So not only are the debts having a toll, not only are they unnecessary, and not only are some of them done in error, and not only can it take years to get an error resolved, but in the meantime, you might still get your wages garnished. Going back to the article, Alabama is also behind other states on hearing most appeals. So when an error does occur, it is often not resolved, but people are still left with thousands of dollars in debts and threats from the department that their wages may be garnished or their tax returns seized if they do not pay. Truly wild. Truly wild when we could just not do this. We could literally just not do this. We could not inflict gratuitous suffering on working people of Alabama. And yet, our leaders in Montgomery are choosing to shake people down, to shake this woman down who works 2 jobs, more than 60 hours a week, both of them under $15 an hour, standing on a prosthetic leg, choosing to try to shake her down for $15,000. Why? Why would we do this?
It's a lot different than the accountability for those PPP loans.
It's
and
insane.
I think, yeah, so this segment has really motivated me that we have to do a segment on that, I think, now, because the contrast just couldn't be more clear. You had these companies, and in some cases, it's kind of a stretch to call them companies, that received lots of federal money with very little strings attached, very little accountability, and the way they've been treated and the way they were allowed to use this money, very, very different from the way these poor folks have been treated by the unemployment system.
Of course. Of course, because that's how the system is. The system is not made for working people. The system is made for bosses, for rich people. And that's exactly, that goes exactly back to what we were talking about. Attorney General Steve Marshall sitting on a child labor case for 5 months. dozens of instances of violations of this law with obvious knowledge of Hyundai, its subsidiary, and the independent contractor, and the third party, the temp agency or whatever. Obvious violations of child labor laws in the state of Alabama. But we're not going to be enforcing that. Instead of going after Hyundai, instead of going after foreign millionaires, instead of going after people who are taking advantage of children in the state of Alabama, what are we doing? We're going after working people who are working 60 hours a week at multiple jobs for less than $15 an hour for $15,000. It's just absolutely disgusting. Just disgusting. I mean, there's no sense in it. There really is no sense in it. But that's going to be, we had one more segment that we were going to do, but I think we'll probably save that for next week since we are running short on time. So we will go ahead, and that's going to be a wrap for it on the radio for us. But you can find us, if you're listening to us on the radio, you want to hear more, we go for an extra hour and a half. We do the whole program again, basically, but with different stuff. But the time, we do basically a second half of the show. It's online only. Online only. You can find us on YouTube or Facebook at The Valley Labor Report and listen to the rest of the show. Or you could listen to somebody else say the exact same thing that you hear on the radio the rest of the week. So let's go ahead and do a couple of plugs before we get off the radio. First, if you missed our coverage of the Labor Notes Conference or want more, Angela Bonet at Labor Notes just published an article titled 2022 Labor Notes, a special moment for the labor movement, which quoted extensively from our interview with Kim Kelly and Isaiah Thomas while providing an excellent recap of the conference. Check that out. Hometown Organizing Project is conducting a free brake light clinic today, July 23rd, in Tuskegee from 4 to 7 p.m. if you want to check that out. Brews to Benefit, the Yellowhammer Fund, on Monday, July, it would be the 25th. From 3 to 9 p.m. at Straight to Ale Brewing in Huntsville, Alabama. Brews to Benefit the Yellowhammer Fund, which is an abortion fund in the state of Alabama. So you can go there if you want to raise money for them. The Free Automotive Repair and Service Project, hosted by the North Alabama School for Organizers, is going to be on August 14th from 9 to 3 at Knights Village in Huntsville. You can leave us a voicemail at 844-899-TVLR. You can buy our new hat, pre-order our new shirt, or give us money on our website at tvlr.fm.
Get those shirt pre-orders in, y'all.
Get the shirt pre-orders in for sure. Actually, and let's throw the shirt up on the on the site so people can hear it. Everybody is familiar with the "Go to Church or the Devil Will Get You" sign. We got a shirt outright that's available for pre-order right now in whatever color you want, basically, that says "Join a union or the boss will get you," which is very cool, very specific for Alabama union members, and it's been very popular. And so go ahead and find us online, where we're going to be talking to Connor Lewis about Matt Taibbi's bad take on the World Socialist website. We're going to be talking about Tim Pool fans' response to our critique of him, and we're going to be talking to David Griscom about the limits of liberal climate policy. The limits of liberal climate policy. Which may be more than you would think. So go ahead, check us out online, The Valley Labor Report, wherever you find anything, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, podcast, TikTok. We'll see you next week. All power to the workers. Just for a second. Okay, so we got rid of those folks on the radio. Howdy, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for staying with us. We really do have a great overtime lined up for you today. You can still call in 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. Call or text the show anytime. You can leave us a voicemail if we are not on the air. And we're going to take a short break and be right back with Connor Lewis at the House Red on Twitter, editor of the Labor Journalism Collective Strike Wave, about Matt Taibbi. Bad stuff. But we're going to take a break and we will be right back.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
All right, folks. We're back.
We're back. You're listening to the Valley Labor Report, Alabama's only union talk radio show, and we are now in overtime. This is the second half of the program that we do that's only online. You're not going to hear this on the airwaves, folks. This is rarefied air that we're in right now. So the first thing that we are going to talk about, and we're getting Connor Lewis in the Zoom right now. But while we do that, I'm going to go ahead and give you kind of a breakdown of what we're going to be talking about. I'm going to give you a little bit of backstory, or a little bit of explanation of what we're going to be talking about. So first, let's throw this tweet up from Eric London. Says, quote, "The UAW has rejected WSWS labor editor Jerry White, SEP's request for press credentials to report on next week's UAW convention, a significant violation of the First Amendment." That's interesting. Labor reporters, even if you aren't a socialist, we ask you write to our, at UAW to demand reversal. Hashtag 1A. So that's interesting. Critical listeners will know that the United Auto Workers is not a government agency. So it would not be definitionally a violation of the First Amendment, whether we agree or disagree with it. Let's go to this next tweet by Matt Taibbi. He says, "This is one of the most ridiculous things imaginable. What a joke American organized labor is." That is super bizarre. And then somebody replied to him that said, "Have you ever read any of WSWS's labor, quote, reporting? They are not a serious news or journalistic organization." And Matt Taibbi said, "So you deny people credentials because they disagree with you." And let's put that tweet up. And the World Socialist website absolutely is a serious organization, even though I disagree with a lot of what they write. Which is bizarre. Just a bizarre thing to say. And then let's go to this last tweet here from a friend of the show, Connor Lewis, and then we'll bring Connor on to talk about it. And this tweet is, "Even if we conceded this is ridiculous, it's not. What's actually a joke is some dumbass dismissing over 55 million international unions and 14 million union members because some press coordinator denied a dude press credentials." And that's obviously...
Fucking A, right? I mean, seriously.
Seriously. So we've got Connor on now. Connor Lewis is editor of the Labor Journalism Collective Strikewave. He is a union staffer. He is a union member. Connor, welcome to the program. We appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So this started with the United Auto Workers rejecting the World Socialist website's request for press credentials. And Matt Taibbi's contention is that basically you should give press credentials to anybody who wants them, apparently, and also that the World Socialist website is a serious organization. What would be your immediate thought to both of those contentions?
My first kind of question is, are they going to give press credentials to The Blaze? Are they going to give it to Breitbart? Are they going to give it to any variety of right-wing organizations? I mean, any reasonable person understands that there's a limit to where you issue press credentials, especially when you're talking about press credentials for a governing body of your organization that has a wider range of political organizations that are opposed to its existence. I mean, there is a reasonable spectrum, and I think that it's totally fine for a union to decide what is and isn't, within that spectrum.
And now also, I went over this, but I just want to get your take on it. Do you think this is a violation of the First Amendment of the United States Constitution?
Absolutely not. I mean, it's an absurd contention because, again, it's the same thing, right-wing, I don't know a polite term to use for it, but a lot of right-wing folks will say that Twitter censoring them or getting reported on Twitter is a violation of their First Amendment rights, and obviously that's not the case. It's a private organization. We can have a reasonable discussion about the degree to which they control content and information on those platforms. Right. But private organizations do absolutely have the right under the First Amendment to control who has access, and it's just an absurd contention.
Right. And now, so you said that obviously, they've got the right to do this. It's not a violation of the First Amendment. And you will be limiting to a certain extent based on people that are fundamentally opposed to the existence of your organization, like right-wing organizations like The Blaze and Breitbart. Potentially, I mean, we don't know if they've issued them press credentials. I think probably our assumption would be that they haven't. But if they did, they should not give those organizations press credentials because they're not serious about labor reporting. And so
when people are acting in bad faith,
right,
and you know that up front, you should take that into account. That's a reasonable thing to do.
And we have had our own run-ins with the World Socialist website, but for somebody listening that has never heard of the World Socialist website, which is probably going to be most of you, they're going to hear that and they're going to say, World Socialist website, aren't socialists like pro-worker? Aren't they, pro-union? Why would it be that a union doesn't want pro-worker people reporting on their convention? So what is your take on the stance of the World Socialist website and some of their history and some of why a union might not be interested in having them at their convention?
Well, the World Socialist website is basically the organ of the Socialist Equality Party, which is a very particular Trotskyist group. And I would say that most other groups that have some ideological connection to Trotskyism would agree that the Socialist Equality Party is, let's just say, out there on a number of questions. And one of the things that they particularly take a hard line on is basically a very hostile orientation toward the labor movement. And there are plenty of critiques to be made, some of which are made by Trotskyists, some of which are made by, heck, even the average rank and file union member probably has their own, their own thoughts on that. But basically, it's an instinctually and instinctively oppositional standpoint that assumes that all unions, by virtue of basically being institutional and large, are somehow critically flawed and need to be, dramatically changed in ways that basically would more or less represent the destruction of those unions as organized entities. One of the big lines that they've taken is, basically vote down every single contract, form a rank and file committee. What that actually means is left fairly undefined. And, they have a very particular orientation toward the institutional labor movement that I think can be fairly characterized as hostile.
And that is, I want to underscore the degree to which it is not strategically good and it's not in good faith. They wrote articles during the first Bessemer campaign encouraging workers to vote no against the union at Amazon. They have encouraged workers to rescind their union membership, to stop paying dues. They've encouraged workers to be freeloaders in union workplaces and to not organize with to not organize with a union. These are not principled critiques of the labor movement, of which there are many, and which we have made for reform. These are people that are fundamentally opposed to any and all organized labor. Even the Amazon labor union, they have taken a critical stance towards and said that it's been already somehow overtaken by corporate interests. I mean, it's genuinely amazing, because the Amazon Labor Union would presumably be basically what they would be advocating for, rank and file committees, quote unquote, that are not affiliated with the organized labor movement, with the AFL. And here they are. This is a successful implementation of what they would be saying people should do, and they're attacking it already.
Right. And, I think that one of the things that's really, it's almost funny that basically any degree of success seems to be suspicious to them.
Right.
If you actually have organization and the ability to win, it's automatically suspicious. And they don't realistically have any answers or alternatives that are credible. Again, they'll talk about forming a rank and file committee. What does that actually mean? What in practical terms, what does that mean?
Right. And
what is it about voting for a union that automatically makes that organization suspect or, not politically abused?
Right.
You can do a rank and file committee while an existing union is in the workplace. And in fact, I would argue it would be easier because
yes.
You'll have a contract, You'll have stewards, you'll have just cause protections, so that when you are building this rank and file committee and, doing your Trotsky study group, you'll have less hassle from the boss, theoretically. So that, when they were telling Amazon workers and Bessemer to vote no, that really just stuck with me. I have my own theories about this organization, but yeah, that one really stuck.
Yeah, and that
oh no, go ahead.
That I think that's really kind of an example of where they diverge from a lot of other Trotskyist groups and what makes them exceptional. Because I think that a lot of other Trotskyist groups would say exactly the same thing. You don't want to throw out, whether or not they have critiques of institutional labor or collective bargaining agreements or whatever, you don't want to throw that out. You can do that and then also have your rank and file committee to push for more. And that's, I think, where the key divergence is and what makes them, again, I'm just going to say unique.
Right.
And out of touch, perhaps.
And Reckless Future in the chat said, I had been wondering what the deal with Trots was. And I guess we do want to delineate at least the critique of the World Socialist website with critiques of Trotskyism in general, because there are Trotskyist groups that are not going to tell you to burn your union card and to vote no in a union election.
Right. I think there are groups and individuals of various leftist persuasions, whether they be Trotskyist or other types of Marxist or anarchist or whatever that may be. There are folks with pretty diverse viewpoints who are acting in good faith, who, share certain core values, people that we would consider, comrades who are fighting for the same things, even if we don't always, have the same ideas about how to do that or what it looks like. And I think, I know on this show, we've always tried to be pretty non-sectarian and be open to that, that there are going to be folks who are not socialists, who are just kind of vaguely progressive, who are with us. There are folks who are diehard, Marxists for many years who are going to be with us, and everything in between. So yeah, I just, I'm kind of seconding that, Jacob, that I don't want it to be perceived that we're trashing an entire ideology. It's this one particular organization who mysteriously has significant resources,
despite no support from from working people.
Very, very few rank and file members out there that you can ever find, but they somehow are on the scene of every picket, just about. And, their website is pretty much near the top of search engine results. So I have a lot of questions about how that works out, and I'll just say, if I were a federal agent trying to devise a PSYOP, it might look something like that. Not saying that's what it is, but if I'm just putting myself in that headspace, it might look something like this.
Yeah, I think that I think that the point about trying to differentiate between them and, there's a wide range of ideological currents. And I will say that, one of, I think, the key political contributions of kind of the Trotskyist tradition to talking about labor is, and there's a wide range of this, and people have a very visceral reaction. But if you actually go back and read Kim Moody's rank and file strategy, there's a lot of really interesting stuff in there. And even if you don't agree with it entirely, I would say any person that is looking at the labor movement, looking to revitalize the labor movement, at least has to seriously engage with that. You can't just dismiss it. And so I'd say that, it's really important to distinguish these really fringe groups that may have originated in a particular ideological tradition, whether it's, RevCom or, WSWS, from those traditions themselves. And, I think that I will say that I have a lot of questions about WSWS. The same way, I have a lot of questions about groups like RevCom and how they do seem to be. I've had my own run-ins with RevCom showing up at labor actions. And, I have questions. I'll leave it at that.
And well, let's, so Matt Taibbi's response to this is that the World Socialist website is a serious organization. And so I want to go over just a bit of some factual errors that they have made in their reporting about us. They said that I'm an AFL-CIO staffer, which I'm not. They were implying that I got big money from the AFL-CIO to basically be a propagandist for them. I don't take any money from this program. The money that we raise for this program goes directly to radio stations to be on the air. I do it totally in volunteer, and I'm a rank and file union member, and I've been elected to the Labor Council, and all of the work that I do associated with that, I take vacation time for it if I have to take off work. I take my own annual leave, right? And so that really frustrated me. They also said I'm a DSA representative. I'm not even a member of DSA. And so, they're willing to just fabricate things that they're willing to just fabricate facts in their reporting based on nothing.
And if they're willing to do that,
it puts the rest of their thing in question.
Yeah, I mean, if you're willing to go to that extent to make up shit about a union guy who has a radio show in North Alabama, that makes me question the credibility of all of your coverage.
Mm-hmm.
And the sad thing is, if you were looking for socialist news and analysis, it's going to be one of the first places you find. I found it probably 15, 20, years and years ago when I was first really getting into politics.
My mom found it when she was looking for some of my reporting on the Warrior Met strike. And she was like, Jake, what is this? And so I had to spend 15 minutes on the phone with my mom explaining to her what these crazy people were doing. And so what is your experience, like when you saw Taibbi talk about this is a serious organization, what are some of the things that went through your mind?
Well, I'm wondering how Matt Taibbi defines serious, and some serious questions about his just general judgment. Aside from his judgment about WSWS, I think that one of the things that you see in a lot of, and Matt Taibbi is in kind of this, sphere of kind of Iraq era, kind of like civil libertarians that, kind of pass for what was the public left at that time. Right. And I think that you've really seen a lot of the limits of their political viewpoints over the past decade, because they really don't have a lot to offer except for yelling a lot about a very kind of eclectic, politically eclectic group of things, and this kind of maximalist view of civil libertarianism that I would throw Glenn Greenwald into that camp. And, there's a lot of overlaps there. So, I think that to them, his kind of knee-jerk reflexive defense of WSWS says a lot about his own politics and the drawbacks of them, as well as, I think, again, well, some of his judgment. But as far as WSWS being a serious organization, I'm not going to pretend that I've read every single thing that they've written, and I'm sure that if you really dug, you could probably find something that was interesting, that wasn't, wasn't totally out there, that might be, insightful or, have something to offer. But on the whole,
I'll say I found some articles from them where like 90% of it pretty solid.
Right.
Then you get to the end, and then there's something like totally batshit thrown in.
Right. And that's the frustrating thing is, even when there is solid reporting, they always have to go back to the line. They always have to bring it back to the line and the line that they're trying to push. And, that's that's to an extent to be expected, but I think it shows the degree to which that line is actually divorced from what they're talking about when it's such a jarring, here's what we're laying out, and then right back to that line, and it just seems like it gives you whiplash.
Yes.
I think that realistically, aside from operating this website, you really can't point to anything that they've done. You can't point to any concrete political successes. You can't point to any kind of, concrete organization. You can't point to chapters. You can't point to really anything except for running this website, publishing books. And, you could have a discussion about the value of that politically, but I think it does tell you something about the seriousness of the organization, that there's really not a lot that you can point to outside of, again, they got a website and some of them have published some books.
Right. And, it's not like they just want to be a journalism outfit. They are an activist organization. It's not like Jacobin. Jacobin is explicitly and only a media outfit. They are associated, in the popular view with DSA, and I think rightfully so. But Jacobin as a thing is a media institution. The World Socialist website is explicitly an organ of the Socialist Equality Party. And at the end of every labor article, they're always calling for these rank and file committees or whatever, and they have nothing to show for it. So it would be one thing if there was nothing to show for it because they're just a media outfit, but they're not, and they don't want to be, or they pretend that they don't. I think Adam and I might contend that they don't actually want to be because potentially they're a psyop. But let's say that they do want to be a serious force and actually create these work and file committees. Well, they haven't. There's nowhere. They can't even. They do not even point to any successes of their quote unquote rank and file committees. The industrial workers of the world is definitely a more they try to be a more radical, a more militant union, and they have lots of critiques, and I think some of them go a bit too far in their critiques of the institutional labor movement. But they have successes that they can point to. They have campaigns that they can point to. They have public things that they point to all the time, and there's nothing for the World Socialist website or the Socialist Equality Party.
Yeah, I think that realistically, if we're just kind of playing this out, even if someone read an article, saw this call for a rank and file committee and thought, that sounds interesting. I'm going to guess that a couple of phone calls with core SEP members probably scares them off.
Adam has a story about that himself.
Yeah, that's literally happened to me as a young lefty who was trying to find my way in the world, especially in Alabama, where obviously I didn't have a lot of local contacts. So yeah, been there, done that. One thing that you mentioned though about Matt Taibbi and like sort of there's this factions, maybe not the right word for it, but there's like a grouping of folks. I think Glenn Greenwald, that's who came to my mind too. There's some overlap there. But I think it does show the limits of their politics, as you said, and a kind of, it seems they're divorced from actual materialist analysis of the world and divorced from labor, both the movement of labor, the institutions inside that movement, and just labor in general as a concept. That's what I am picking up. And the thing is, I'm really disappointed because I was always a big fan of Matt's writing. I think as a writer, he is very talented. And I used to, religiously read his stuff in the Rolling Stone. But the fact that you would maybe it was just an offhand tweet. He didn't mean much by it. But, like you said, to dismiss literally millions of people over something this petty, it does seem revealing of kind of an emptiness inside his viewpoints.
And, the individualism of these politics, I think, is really where it falls. Because
that's what I was looking for.
the just intense individualism of this politics, they can't cope with the idea of any kind of collective project, because any kind of collective project, it involves setting aside your own, priorities and working with a group, and, to actually trying to build some kind of collective consensus. And I honestly think that whether it's a personality thing, whether it's a principal political viewpoint, folks like Taibbi, like Glenn Greenwald, etc., they just can't cope with that. There's something that they just can't deal with there. And so I think that they're always going to struggle with the idea of unions. Even if they kind of in the abstract think, okay, yeah, unions are good, I think that they're always really going to struggle with them.
Yep, I agree. Connor, I appreciate you taking the time to chat with us about this.
As always, really
very frustrating. So,
always happy to be here.
All right, brother. Talk soon.
All right, thanks.
All right, bye. We're going to be talking here in about 15 minutes with David Griscom about the limits of climate policy. But first, we wanted to get to this, just a little bit more less substantive stuff before we get into some nitty-gritty things. A couple of weeks ago, we critiqued Tim Pool. And last week, we dropped the clip, and his fans were not happy, to put it lightly. So I wanted to take a little bit of time to address some of those critiques. First, though, let's quickly review his bad take about unions and our argument for why his take is bad. To set the clip up, Ben Burgess is making the point that if you care about free speech, you should be incredibly in favor of unions. Why? Because if you and your coworkers are not unionized, if you have not used your leverage to secure a contract, you are an at-will employee, meaning your boss can fire you for any reason or no reason at all, including because they don't like your speech, and they often do. Workplaces are where people spend most of their waking lives, and yet we are less free than anywhere. We are less free in the places that we spend most of our waking lives than we are anywhere else. So one of the first things that workers will do when they unionize is fight for a clause in their contract that lays out a process for just cause and progressive discipline and termination, meaning you have due process. If your boss wants to terminate you or discipline you, it has to be related to your performance, not because your boss is having a bad day. And that's clearly a win for free speech, because the biggest threat to free speech in this country that most people have, generally speaking, does not come from the government, at least not at this moment, and nor does it come from what's happening on Facebook and Twitter. And this is not to discount those things, right? And I think I tend to have a certain amount of sympathy, like we were talking about, to some of these civil libertarian positions about free speech. I tend to be a bit open to that. And a bit more open maybe about what we should allow on platforms than some other people. And I think that the control, and I think this is something that a lot of people will agree with, the control that these private and unaccountable corporations have over what has become de facto the public square is bad. And I think that there are certainly conversations to be had about that, and there are serious conversations, and I'm not discounting those in any way. But getting banned on Twitter is simply factually, as a fact of the matter, in reality, it is not the biggest threat that a working person has to their ability to speak freely. It's simply not. What is it? It is getting fired, getting a demotion, getting their hours cut, facing retaliation on the job. These are the things that materially affect working people, that affect their very ability to eat and survive, and it happens every single day. which is why workers organizing is such a big deal if you genuinely care about the ability of regular working people to speak freely. If that's what you want, then you want to be able to insulate working people from the tyranny that the boss has over what they can say at and outside of work. But Tim disagreed with that. So let's see why.
Have you ever been in a union? Just side question.
Yeah.
Which one? When?
I was in a couple. I've been in the.
Which one?
I've been in the UFCW, and when I was working at Meyer in Michigan, and.
Noted and accepted. I didn't believe you. I couldn't imagine, based on what you'd said, that'd been true. Because I've been in 2 unions. I was in the Transport Workers Union, and I worked at a grocery store as well, which also had a grocery workers union. And they were so corrupt that I was like, the statement you made is just like your perspective I can respect. That's coming from you, but it's like a blanket subjective perspective. But I don't want to.
Not at all subjective.
I don't want to have an argument about union.
However corrupt that union might have been that you were part of.
2 of them.
If you had been accused of an infraction subject to disciplinary process, then you would have had the option of having them represent you in that process. That
Wrong.
Okay.
Bro. So I don't want to get into an argument about unions, other than to say, like, your subjective perspective.
It's not subjective. It's a fact that the effect of unions is to give you due process.
And sometimes they don't because humans are fallible. But I digress.
Okay, but you can say the same thing about having trial by jury, that like sometimes it's not a good due process.
So the issue is
still a due process.
Yeah, so Tim's arguments were, 1, I've been in unions, didn't like them. 2, your perspective is subjective. And 3, humans are fallible. And we just frankly did not find these arguments convincing. We go over it more in depth in the first video, but he says that Ben's perspective is subjective, but he did not base his argument entirely on his experience. Ben didn't. Ben Burgess based it on material realities, the leverage that workers get when they unionize, the language that are in their contracts, where Poole's argument is entirely subjective. It is entirely based on his experience.
Right. You can actually point to the law.
Right.
And the responsibility of a labor union to represent its members, and how the failure to do so can result in a DFR charge. That's real. That's not a subjective statement. That's factual.
Exactly. And it's not subjective. And so just like last time, we aren't going to say. Also, speaking to his point that humans are fallible, and so sometimes you're not going to get a perfect execution of what Ben is talking about every single time.
That's true.
Just like last time, we are not here to argue that every single union, every single time, behaves perfectly. But the fact remains that union workers are less likely to be disciplined or fired for nonsense reasons. And it's really as simple as that, as far as the free speech argument goes. It is really as simple as that. So there's the recap in about 5 minutes. Let's go through some of the comments on the video. The first one from JST Do-It 99 says, have you ever been in a union? I have most of my life. I'm very sad that young people are so stupid. Now, several of the people that saw that video and not our other work, several people saw that video and not our other work. And so, that's fine. You're not going to know our background. But we did mention Adam's union work. If you actually listen to the video, we did mention Adam's work for a teachers union. And so, but yes, both of us have been in and very much are currently in unions. I'm a member of the American Federation of Government Employees. I'm an assistant vice president of my local, and I'm secretary treasurer of the Labor Council, which is the regional federation of unions in the area. I'm also a member of the Industrial Workers of the World. Adam is currently a union stagehand, a member of the International Alliance of Theatrical and Stage Employees. He was formerly a member of the Alabama Teachers Union, the Alabama Education Association, and after that, he was a staffer for the AEA. So
where I was also a member of the National Staff Organization, the union which represents NEA employees and NEA affiliate employees, and where I was also elected to serve as an executive board member, as well as on the bargaining team. When I was a member of AEA, I was also elected to be a delegate at the state and national level, as well as local board of directors. And we could both go on. But yes, we've both very much been in unions. I've spent the last decade of my life in the labor movement.
Yes. And beyond our individual involvement in unions, we are very much in contact with people in unions, and we talk to them all the time.
At least once a week.
At least, at least once a week, but beyond that for both of us. So let's go to the next one. Now that we've put our what's standpoint epistemology, we've done a little bit of that.
We got to flash our credentials.
Flash our credentials. Okay. So the next one comes from Timothy Larson. Free speech is an issue in the workplace and not on Twitter. I'm a union worker. You are not. We are. Very few people are scared to speak out. This is not a problem at all. People speak out all the time with no repercussions. I'm a Democratic union worker, and you two are so far from reality, and it shows. You're trying to speak for people you know nothing about. I have great pay and benefits and a great 401k. Your immaturity on policy and politics is scaring me, and you're speaking for a workforce you know nothing about. I get 2 raises a year because we spoke out and came together with no repercussions.
Well, good for you.
Thank you for making our point.
Right. I mean, good for you for coming together, for speaking out, for getting a raise.
You're exactly the person that we're talking about. You don't have a problem because you and your coworkers organized. And we're incredibly glad to hear it. And Timothy Larson, if you want to call into the show and tell us more about it, we would welcome it. But you are not you're not the people that we're speaking about. Most workers do not have unions in their workplace. Most workers are not organized into unions, and so they don't have the protections that you have and that I have and that Adam has. They don't have those protections, and we want everyone to have those protections, and those protections are what make you able to speak out freely without repercussions, and we want to make everybody have that, and Tim doesn't.
Right, and that's your experience. That subjective. That is your subjective experience in your workplace. But I assure you, you talk to workers. Many workers across various industries know that what they say, both on the job and outside of work, both online and in real life, can have repercussions.
Right.
On the job site.
Right.
If you don't believe me, go on Facebook and post about your company. Post about your boss.
Well, now you won't have a problem because you're in a union like we're advocating for, and you've got these just cause protections in your contract, presumably, and so you're not going to have that repercussion. But anybody else,
even in unionized industries, it's still a concern.
Right.
It's still a factor that you have to factor in, and retaliation can still happen. I mean, teachers, for example. Teachers have to be extremely careful about what they say outside of work, what they post on social media, both in terms of their politics, their personal beliefs, their religious beliefs, their personal activities. So if you are a rank and file teacher, even with a union, you still have to tread carefully because your picture on Facebook of you enjoying an adult beverage could be misconstrued as you being immoral.
Right.
Or, your Facebook or Twitter post about Black Lives Matter could absolutely result in you being called into the principal's office. Now, hopefully, you have a union rep and you can say, hey, I want my rep here if we're going to have this meeting. And then you can go from there. But come on now. Timothy, good on you and your coworkers for organizing and fighting the good fight and getting that pay raise. But solidarity is about understanding everyone else and understanding that while we're all sharing certain struggles, we face our own unique struggles as well, and it's important that we have each other's backs.
Yep. Hambone says you want freedom of speech at work? Start your own business. Freedom of speech protects you from the government. And Hambone, you're thinking of the First Amendment. that protects you from the government, but freedom of speech is a broader value that we can have more or less of in political and, yes, economic arenas like the workplace, where we spend most of our waking lives. And no, I don't think free speech should be reserved for the boss.
Yeah, what a great solution. Literally everyone who wants freedom of speech should just have to start their own business.
Yeah.
Think it through.
Francisco Martinez says unions can crush a member's free speech too. And to that we say, yes, but unlike your employer, that's illegal. It is not illegal for your employer to crush your free speech, but it is illegal for your union to crush your free speech. Unlike your employer, you have recourse if your union illegitimately stifles your speech. First, through internal processes with your coworkers that you can get addressed. And then, if you can't resolve it, you can actually make a complaint with the Department of Labor, because there is a union member's Bill of Rights that has been codified into law that gives you free speech within your union, and the right to speak freely at union meetings, about your union, at work and outside of work.
Right. And we've talked a lot on this show about how unions, some are more democratic than others. But at the end of the day, you can show up to a meeting and conceivably, especially if you know little Robert's rules, get on the agenda. You can take the floor. You can take the mic. You can say your piece. You might get booed. You might get cheered. You might get a second. You might not. I mean, that's the messiness of democracy. And to the extent that your union is not democratic, well, there's something to work on, for one thing. Right. But as you laid out, there are actual, there's a process in place in every union for dealing with this. And when that does not work, you actually can go legal with it. So, sorry. Yes, I suppose, I mean, Francisco, it's a possible thing, but it's not comparable.
It is not a response to our argument. Ubiquitous says, the at-will model for small businesses came about precisely because unions overextended. If you're talking about a business under 25 people, then the community becomes rather tight-knit. If someone is pulling their weight, then it is counterproductive for a boss to fire their employees.
Because bosses are only going to do things that are productive. They would never act irrationally.
We've got somebody who has the workplace understander has logged on. If an unresolvable conflict comes up, then it is a case where the 1 versus 24 would lose with or without a union. Thus, that employee can leave before things get out of hand. The departure should give reason on management to consider the costs. Employees have business knowledge, and loss thereof costs the business the means of production. The small business nature provides a union by virtue of tight-knit community.
Oh, my God.
It is when business gets large enough for management to lose the call to senses where there is a practical call for a union. At-will
Brother, get the boot out of your mouth.
Come on, man. This is the workplace understander has logged on. At-will has been the standard, just for the record, before, during, and after unions. At-will was the standard. And no, that is not an accurate description of working for a small business.
God, no. I mean, maybe it
small
was...
business tyrant is a word for a reason.
I mean, and hey, maybe that's been your experience in a small family business. And if so, good for you. But that is certainly not the case for many other folks. And please, I think it doesn't take much to understand that bosses do not always act rationally. They don't even always act in the best interest of their profit margins.
No.
Either, certainly not in the long term,
Look
but
at
even in
Warrior
the short
Met.
term.
Look at Warrior Met. Let's go to Mushroom LW. Mushroom LW says, strongly disagree. Let's just say there's a bolt tightening union and a screw tightening union. I'm in the bolt tightening union. If I know how to use a screwdriver, can I grab a screwdriver and tighten a screw that needs to be tightened and I know how to do it? My experience tells me no. You will be punished for doing the wrong union job. On a free market model, you can develop multiple skills and become valuable to an employer and gain raises faster than a union model. I think they meant union model. But that being said, in a free market, you should be allowed to unionize. I just believe at a single company, I should not be stripped of my freedom to not join a union to get that same job. I should be free to choose which model I prefer. Now, here, we're moving a bit away from free speech and into other aspects of unions. But on this, there are two things to say. Unions do have job classifications, and that is good. It is good for people to do their job and not give labor to the company for free. That's a good thing. It's a good thing to have job descriptions and to not give the money free labor. Okay? That's a good thing. And the workers are the ones that put those job classifications in there. So if you want to have a more wandering type of job classification, guess what you can do? You can put that in your job description. Also, you should not be free to get the union benefits without paying union dues. That is being a freeloader. If you now, you are obviously free to work in a non-union workplace. You can go work at the Hyundai facility in Alabama where they use child labor and have amputation hazards if you want. There's no union there. Go work there. If you don't like unions, go work there instead of working in a union workplace, getting union wages, union health care, union benefits, union job protections, and not paying union dues. You freeloader. Go work somewhere else. Go work somewhere else.
Right.
And also, one more thing on that, trade unions train in much more of a tradesman type fashion than non-union construction companies. If you come up in a trade union apprenticeship, like the iron workers, the electrical workers, pipe fitters, steam fitters, all of these unions, these trade unions, they are going to give you real quality collegiate level training and education about how to do your craft in a much more comprehensive way than you're going to get on the job site in a non-union construction company, because they just want you to learn the one task to do, and then they will pay you less, and they'll pay you less.
And I do have some sense of kind of what they're hitting at, like something I experience on the job with IATSE Local 900. We have different positions. If I'm there as a stagehand and not a loader, my job is to be a stagehand, not to load and unload the truck. That means I don't get on the truck. That's a different job. That's a different pay scale. That's different people on the schedule. That's a different crew. I mean, and those things are there for reasons.
Right.
Reasons being different job descriptions, different pay rates, and safety.
Right.
Right? I mean, that's something to consider, that because I've heard that complaint before. I've even heard that complaint, on the job there from folks who are like, oh, yeah, these union rules, sometimes kind of get in the way, huh? Well, not really.
Right.
On the balance, I'd much prefer it be that way than the chaotic, loosey-goosey, non-union work environment where folks are jumping in between departments. Folks are doing work that they're not trained to do. Folks are doing work that they're not really being compensated to do. So, personally, I'll take that any day of the week, even if it means, hey, I have to stand here and wait for the appropriate personnel to do this job. That means I have to stand by for 3 minutes and wait for them to show up or whatever. Hey, good. That's good. I'll take it.
Yep, exactly. Let's hit a couple of funny ones before we get to David Griscom. I think we've got him in the Zoom, so we're going to run through these pretty fast. Jason Larson says, I regret clicking on the end increasing its view count. As a white cis male, I am sorry. Not for being white and straight, though.
No one's asking you to be sorry for being white or straight, but thanks for clicking on the video anyway.
Thank you for your contribution. Moist Potato says, just about anybody can make a podcast these days, huh? This actually made me lose brain cells. Buddy, I got news for you. We're on the damn radio, okay? We're on 3 FM radio stations, so get your facts straight. And they don't just let anybody get on the radio.
That's true. But yeah, anyone can start a podcast. I mean, clearly, if you're a Tim Pool fan.
Fizz Graffiti says, maybe I'm not woke enough, but how is anyone supposed to get past these visuals and pay attention to the points these two are trying to make? Skinny tie, short sleeve polka dot shirt, and aviator glasses, WTF, big ass red headphones, so many distractions. Not everyone is meant to be on camera, and that's all right. That's why God invented the radio. Does everyone have to be a video star? For crying out loud, think about your audience. Why make them suffer the cringe? And I appreciate your contribution, Fizz Graffiti. It's a bizarre contribution. That tie that I was wearing that day, and I wore this one just for you. The flower tie that I've got on, I wore it just for you. But the tie that I had on that day was actually a great uncle's tie. Like, that is literally a tie from the 60s. Like, that was actually an old man tie. And so very much not a hip woke fashion statement.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but these folks need to stop saying the word woke.
Yes.
It just grates on me at this point to where they have so overused it. It's so played out. I just don't understand it. How is wokeness related to
what I'm wearing?
What you wore that day?
Wearing a button-down shirt and a tie is woke now? Is it?
How do you dress unwoke? Mr. Graffiti, please comment. Let us know. How do we dress unwoke? I'd like to know.
Yeah,
I'm not going to follow your advice, but I would be curious to know what it is.
Yeah, that was bananas.
And I'm just going to say this. I know we've got some folks listening who tend to be our very loyal listeners, and
but we're gonna get some other folks listening to this.
I'm
we
sure.
Drop it in as a clip.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I was gonna say. Like, y'all we really do appreciate y'all, the folks who tune in, the folks who participate, who give us good feedback, who give us good critiques.
Mm-hmm.
We really do appreciate that, and I love the little community that's kind of around this show. Yep. And it's definitely, it's interesting how a video that name drops someone like Tim Pool will get 10 times the number of views and engagement versus stuff that we're doing that's like, in my opinion, pretty legit journalism.
Yeah.
Or at the very least, like legitimate discussion of legitimate issues that impact people's lives.
Yeah, and relaying legitimate journalism.
Right.
I don't know that,
interviewing really important people.
Yeah.
People who are organizing, people who are writing important work, people who have been on strike, people who are engaged in struggles in our society. So yeah, I mean that's I guess the frustrating thing about this whole like game of media in the internet age, gaming the algorithm, trying to get clicks and engagement and all that. So all that to say, those of you who listen on a regular basis, certainly those who contribute, however you contribute, whether you just share our stuff or you donate every month or however you're doing it, it really does mean a lot, and we appreciate it because we're not able to use billionaire money to finance this show. We're not making any money off this show. We're lucky if we break even every month.
Yeah.
And that's the only reason we're able to is because of folks like y'all who contribute and some of the organizations who do sponsor the show. So anyway, I'll get off my soapbox. But yeah,
we definitely appreciate
Temple,
that.
You can get fucked.
Yeah.
There you go.
Champagne Humanist says that we both look ready to go downtown, but to different clubs.
I tend to stick with like the union T-shirt or the organization T-shirt, rep a different group every weekend or whatever. Mm-hmm. You go for the more professional news anchor kind of look. But yeah, you do mix it up sometimes.
I mix it up sometimes. It just depends on if I have enough time to like take a shower in the morning.
Yeah, that's true.
So every time you see me in a T-shirt and a hat, just know that I am disgusting.
We're in separate parts of the building here,
right. So he doesn't have to
I can't
smell
them in here.
Yeah. All right. Have we got Griscom in the Zoom?
Let's see here. We do, yes.
All right. So David Griscom is host of Left Reckoning and also recently a new contributor to Jacobin magazine. His recent article, Texas Shows the Pitfalls of Liberal Climate Politics. And we are really excited to break this down with him. David Griscom, welcome to the Valley Labor Report.
Hey, y'all. Always happy to be hanging out with y'all.
Always happy to have you. So, let's talk about this article. What was the impetus for this? What was the thing that spurred you to write this article?
Okay, well, I'll try to keep my head straight because I will say the visuals are very distracting. In particular, your skinny tie is making it very difficult for me to think straight.
It's very woke tie.
And Adam's woke headphones.
I apologize about the headphones. It's the best we can do.
Oh, Lord. Yeah, I mean, like, for me, I mean, obviously I've been following climate politics for a good while. I will admit that I think like a lot of leftists, I always sort of figure it's like, let's advocate for the people to get empowered, implement it. And I hadn't thought too much about what that actually was going to look like. And over the past couple of years, I've started to get a little bit nervous about, a lot of the kind of dominant narratives on the green left. But for me, and this is not to come at AOC or anything, I went to a big Green New Deal rally here in Austin. And it was a really well done rally. They had, people from the Texas Climate Jobs Project there talking about, the need for union push in the movement. Hundreds of people were there. It was a really successful event. And AOC came up and she gave a really great speech. And then though towards the end, she started going a little bit off the cuff and started talking about how, we need to be learning from other systems, and how what we really need to be doing is maybe learning from the Puerto Rican model and decentralizing our grid and basically doing like residential solar, because like the system will never work for us. And for me, I hear that as like a socialist and somebody who wants to build big, powerful industrial and democratically controlled power in this country, my heart stopped a little bit because I realized that this is the kind of thinking that, like, even though, it might seem like, this is sort of moving the ball forward, this is the kind of, neoliberal hellscape that they already are trying to build. Here in Texas, we have one of the most decentralized systems. And, a few things that have been worrying me has been that, ever since we've seen these grid failures, we've seen this massive explosion in residential solar. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with that, right? I can understand as an individual, you say, I want to make sure I have power in moments when the grid fails me. Mm-hmm. But this is an individual solution to a collective problem. And, especially in a state like Texas, I do worry about movements to try to decouple wealthy communities in particular from the state grid, leaving the rest of us with very expensive intermittent power and good, clean, beautiful, sweet power for, wealthy folks in the suburbs. So that was, what has sort of like started me really spending a lot of time reading and thinking and talking to excellent people, on the left, people like Matt Huber, reading people like Fred Stafford, talking to people like Lee Phillips, because I think that we really need to sort of reorient our climate politics towards labor, because I think that even though there's been overtures there, I don't think that commitment has been as serious and rooted as it needs to be.
Right. And that's, I think that is a really interesting, it's really interesting that Texas has begun implementing some of this decentralized stuff, and that has actually been the cause of a significant amount of issues over there in Texas, mm-hmm. right?
Yeah, I mean, so, Texas is not the only state that has basically, split up their power system and created, got a lot of deregulated their power industry. California and New York also have had like massive deregulation, but Texas, as is our nature, just sort of sprinted ahead of everybody else. And we have like an absolutely bizarro system here where it's effectively is a constant auction house for power. So you do have competing power companies for a lot of people. Now, if you're in a city like Austin, we have one provider, and that's the public utility. But they're all on the same grid, which is always sort of bidding up and bidding down the price of electricity, which means in a crisis like the winter storm Uri, or even hell, last week we were getting messages saying, you need to keep your AC up at 7 to 8 degrees, don't wash your clothes, because there was a lot of worries that the power system was going to fail again then.
So it's not good when it's hot or cold.
Yeah, it doesn't work. And the price, effectively, it skyrockets. And, people are still dealing with the fallout of that. I mean, people got bills for literally thousands of dollars after the winter storm. So we have just like this hyper marketized grid here. And I mean, there's a few different threads we can get into. I also get frustrated when I talk about the grid. It's like everyone's favorite thing to talk about is the fact that Texas is not, plugged into the national grid. Certainly a problem and an issue. I'm not saying that it's not, but like that ends up dominating so much of the conversation because it is so uniquely Texan to be like, we're going to have our own grid and all that kind of stuff that people do miss sometimes. I think the real fundamental failure, which is that we have a hyper marketized grid. So, to give an example of why that's a problem, not only in the fact that people get incredibly high electricity bills when, when there's crisis moments, is also about weatherization. So after the failures after Winter Storm Uri, people were arguing, and as politics is wont to do now, it immediately devolves into a culture war. Right wing is blaming the Green New Deal and wind and solar, which was absolute BS. And, liberals and the left were noting that no, it was actually natural gas pipelines that failed. And that's all well and good and true. But you need to do a little bit more investigation to realize why they failed. It's not that the owners of those pipelines were stupid, right? And they just like never thought that it was going to get cold. No, they knew. They have had models for a long time that said, we will, rarely, but every once in a while get these storms that get cold enough and are cold long enough that some of these pipelines will fail. But they made the financial decision that it will cost them more money to weatherize those systems than they would gain from doing so. And if your pipeline actually is successful and doesn't fail at that moment, it's like holding a lottery ticket. It's like one of the quotes one of these providers, had, which is like they made incredible amounts of money, and just politically, like everyone knows where Greg Abbott and the Texas GOP sort of stands on this. But just to put some numbers on it, after the failure, when it became very clear that Abbott wasn't really going to do any kind of significant reforms or pushing on this, he got $1 million in a week. $11 million, Lord, I don't want to understate that. $11 million from, private power corporations. So, there's like fundamental issues to this grid. And the main problem is that has this responsibility not to provide power. That's just like a unintended consequence, frankly, for a lot of these people. It's to make profit. And that is a desire that oftentimes goes against the needs of the people in the sense of like having power that doesn't go off, or the needs of the people of making sure that they can afford their electricity bills.
Right. And how is it that what has Texans response to this been with the the obvious conflict of interest that these people have had, and the obvious dereliction of duty that these private owners of this decentralized power sources have had?
I mean, politically, not too much. So they did pass a bill requiring these providers to weatherize their natural gas pipelines. But it has no enforcement mechanism, and like the date that they needed to do that is so off in the future. It's effectively toothless, symbolic stuff. I mean, Beto and the Texas Democrats, make a big deal about how, just hitting Abbott and the Republican Party on the fact that they're responsible, for the failures, which I think is certainly true because they created that system, and they uphold that system and they protect that system. But there has been, at least from my perspective, like enough of hitting on to like what we need to be doing. And like what we really need to be doing is looking seriously at our power system and taking most of these things back under public control. If we want to be able to provide people electricity. And this is something that Matt Huber notes, people should definitely be reading if they haven't already, is that like, if like the ecological movement's plan is to effectively electrify everything, right? To move off of fossil fuels for transportation, to get rid of gas ranges in your home, things like that, then we really need to start taking seriously the question of energy production and power production, and trying to wrestle that away from private interests. Because if our plan is to basically set up everything on needing electricity, then it's going to be very important as to where that electricity is coming from and who owns that. So there's been that, and there's also been, really sustained movements like the Texas Climate Jobs Project, which is an offshoot of the AFLCIO here, to really start pushing, kind of Green New Deal policies with the focus on labor. But I think, I think they're doing great work, but it's like, this is one of those kind of, sounding the alarm to like the left, is that like, this is a call that needs to be answered. And I'd love to talk a little bit about what's going on in the oil industry in a second, because I think that that's a really important bit here.
That's where I was going to go next, because there's a call that needs to be answered about a labor-led climate transition, but also there's a call that needs to be answered for workers who are being abused right now in the oil industry, and they need to be and they need to be the labor leading the climate transition. And so there are multiple ways that we can begin making these subset of workers, making their lives better, but using the making of their lives better to make everybody's life better by leading by putting them at the front of this climate transition. So talk to us about the attacks that oil workers are under in Texas right now.
I mean, it's been sustained, protracted warfare. And I'll just say up at the top that one of the things that is tough with doing labor organizing in that industry is that, there is this kind of ideology that like, it's a boom and bust cycle, you're a tough guy and like, you have to ride the waves when they're, going, and, hunker down when they're not, right. And, obviously that's BS, because these companies make incredible amounts of profit, but that's just like a hurdle that's worth remembering here. But, there's two stories here. It's the COVID pandemic, and how that affected the industry, and then what's happening today. So, I bring up the COVID pandemic, one, because it has massive effects on the oil industry today. But two, it actually was a bit of a preview of like a post-oil future, or like a future where like the market for oil is not as strong. And what ended up happening? Conservative estimate probably, but over 60,000 oil and gas jobs were lost. Vast majority of those were people who work in the oil fields or produce the machinery needed for extraction, et cetera. Like, these are the people who are like doing the actual labor of it, not folks, hanging out in Houston and Dallas. And while this is happening, while all these people are losing their jobs, being thrown into this absolute failure, by the way, of like government policy and helping out workers in the COVID pandemic, the oil and gas industry was pocketing billions and billions of dollars in tax handouts. National Oil Varco received $591 million in tax benefits, and they fired 22% of their workforce despite getting all these kind of benefits. And by the way, I just wanted to note here, this was one of those things where I really appreciate my editor. He made the piece really clean and concise. But like, I had 10 other ones. Like, I did not note them because they were like the exception. It was like, that was the rule, frankly. But not only are you seeing, did you see that effectively, like, once times got hard for the oil industry, the first people who got punished, the first people who felt the brunt of it were workers. You also have seen a really frightening example in like today with high gas prices, and luckily it seems like they're coming down a bit. But obviously, the Russian invasion of Ukraine plays a big role, supply chain issues, but also the fact that they fired a bunch of their workforce and they can't replace those people plays a huge part in it. And two, this is just like a thing to remember, like when you're coming up against the oil industry, is that this is an entrenched, powerful industry that has a lot of capital behind it. And, these guys don't just write them checks, out of like the sweetness of their heart. They expect to get a return on it. And what happened when the oil and gas industry was getting all these profits from high gas prices over the past 6 months? They took that money and they paid off shareholders in the form of dividends. They didn't invest in production. So like, drop the climate change stuff for a second. We do have a society in this country that still runs on, oil. So we need that, like it's socially necessary at this moment in time for us to have affordable gasoline so that people can get to work and live their lives, and food gets on the shelves, etc. Right. So like this is a moment where like a very clear moment of where you can see like the private industry is just absolutely failing. One, it's failing over the question of climate change, but two, here this is something that like we need in this current moment, and they're unable to produce it because they're much more interested in shoring up their financial position, so the next time that there's a downturn, they will get people know that they'll get paid on the other side of it. So all that's going on in Texas. And then I also noted, if that's all not depressing enough, there's been a protracted war on unions in Texas, most notably in Beaumont, which I believe y'all have talked about on the show. USW, excuse me, someone's calling me.
Oh no, you're
USW, a local 13243 went on experienced a 10-month lockout. And it was extremely devastating to the union. They ended up having to take effectively a very, very bad deal because ExxonMobil has sort of recognized that they can sit these things out and they can sort of weaken and negotiate down union contracts in the industry. There was a really big decertification campaign, which they barely eked out a victory. Undoubtedly, by the way, I know we should say allegedly or whatever, but as to be truthful, but undoubtedly, ExxonMobil is playing a role in trying to push these decertification campaigns, and that's just one example. It's happening all across the state. So, to go from that's the picture of Texas right now in that industry. It's very worrying, especially if you are somebody who believes in something like a just transition or like a Bernie Sanders style like Green New Deal policy. Key plank of that was getting buy-in and leadership from the union movement. And what we're seeing right now is all those workers are under assault, and their position is being weakened. And this is a moment when we really need to be showing up for them today. And I just wanted to note, like, this is something that is, I think, really important, particularly for the left and like the socialist DSA left, is that, I mean, I remember when Bernie Sanders came out with his Green New Deal policy and reading it through and just being absolutely ecstatic because I thought it was phenomenal. And I thought that particularly the just transition was a phenomenal policy. And it is, and it's something that we should uphold and push. But over the past couple of years, especially post, Bernie 2020, I've oftentimes felt where people on like the environmental left just say, well, we support just transition. Right. And like, that's closing of the book on the issue. And it's like, well, no, the just transition has to be an actual commitment. And, I was talking to a friend, Ryan Pollack, who's IBEW, a lead organizer here in Austin. And
I think
he said,
we met him at Labor Notes, actually.
He's a good dude, a very good dude. I'm happy to hear that. But he said, it's not enough for people to say that this is what could happen, that this is going to be here in the future. It's got to be tangible, or else nobody's going to believe you. And like, that's like from like the labor politics to the climate politics. It's just a general point that I think that our side needs to wrap our heads around a bit too, is that, it's not enough just to have like good policies and the right, printout on on the issues. You have to convince people that this is something that one can happen and that you can deliver for them. And I think that the way you open up that door is showing up for them in these very, very clear fights where the stakes are clear as day, especially for anybody who claims to be a unionist or or a socialist or progressive, etc.
Well, now, so all of these attacks on union workers, on oil workers and union workers who are oil workers, it reminds me of the months-long anti-Hillary campaign from the right when she came out with her comments saying that we're going to put coal miners out of jobs. And all of this posturing for coal miners by the right, saying that we're going to protect you, we're going to protect your jobs and your way of life and all this stuff. And so I can only imagine that you've got a clip ready for us right now of Greg Abbott and all these other Texas Republicans standing up for these oil workers and these oil workers who are unionists. Right.
I mean, that's the real irony of all of this, is that, when it comes to actually protecting their wages and, protecting their unions and all of that, like, you get crickets from the GOP. And I think that it's worthwhile to point out the hypocrisy. But then the point is that like, well, then it's an easy game for us. If we don't have to out-message the Republicans, we can be doing that. And the problem is that, you know, I think that like there's a lot of really dedicated people in the movement, but it's not centralized at this moment. You get what I mean? Like there's just like a lot of different interests out there and people advocating for a Green New Deal, for climate change policies. And, you know, what you get more than anything is people pointing to work in the renewable industry. And I don't think I need to, you know, break it down too much for y'all, but that is not a good industry right now for workers. It's highly ununionized. They don't pay very well. And also compared to a lot of other power production systems, like, for example, nuclear, it's not permanent in the terms of, in the case of solar in particular, because you just go in there and you install the panel and then you roll out. So, you know, a lot of those guys who might do that or might be asked to do that, even if they are maybe union workers doing something on the side or something like that, you know, they're being asked to drive like 3-4 hours to do, you know, 2 days work, and that's sort of it, right? It's not like a locally rooted industry. And that doesn't mean that, like, you know, the technology is like dirty or shouldn't be pursued, but there is this kind of like, oh, we have a halo because it's, you know, renewable energy. And yeah, you know, so if you're a guy who's working, you know, in oil and gas, which again, I also want to remind people too, not to valorize it too much. It does pay, you know, pretty well for some folks, but it's rife with, you know, serious workers violations. It's extremely insecure work for a lot of people. It's extremely dangerous. And like that system needs to be improved dramatically. But like, you can't tell somebody who's been making good money doing that kind of work, you know, to start working $18 an hour jobs doing, you know, residential solar as a solution.
Right. And you know, you're talking about it from a worker's angle, and that's really important. And I think that if I'm remembering right, Energy Alabama, an on and off sponsor of the program, is an Alabama renewable nonprofit, and they they have done some work on exposing some solar contractors.
Good.
You know, bad labor practices, which we're very appreciative of them for. They've donated to the Mine Workers Strike Fund. They were able to get
here for the miners.
Yes, and they've been able to get actually the Sierra Club to also make a donation to the Mine Workers Strike Fund. So the folks at Energy Alabama love them, appreciate them, and think that they're not only is their heart in the right place, but I think that they're going in a good direction. But you're talking about this. In the article, the model for building green power also relies heavily on tax credits for residential and also commercial solar, pulling money out of public coffers and directing them to capitalists. And as Matt Huber and Fred Stafford argue, this creates an absurd choice. Either public ownership, because if the TVA builds solar panels, the TVA doesn't get those tax credits. So the TVA does not get that subsidy. And so either you're going to have public ownership and pricier energy, or you're going to have private ownership and cheaper energy. And so what the TVA actually does is it gets these small, small consumers or companies to build TVA that it buys the power from. But who's the people making the money from that, and who's the people making the decisions? It's capitalists. It's not us. It's not the public-owned TVA. And when I saw that the TVA does not get the same subsidies and they cannot offer solar power for the same price that a local capitalist can,
they're barred from doing it.
It's insane.
Right.
That's crazy.
And that's a federal carve out for the industry, is that the public sector cannot compete with private solar power. Right. And that's, yeah, exactly. Like, that's just an extremely dangerous precedent, and it's unnecessary, you know, to be setting that up. And like, this is exactly like, you know, the point that I've been trying to get. It's like, you know, people sometimes have got mad at me, you know, accusing me of now shilling for the oil industry, which is just ridiculous, or being against like solar and wind. I'm not, but I am against importing the same kind of neoliberal model into, you know, the way that we want to power society in the future, especially when we do have this great opportunity to do something different. Right. It's extremely frustrating. And, you know, the way that I've been phrasing is that, like, you know, for a long time, like the slogan on the left was like, believe the scientists. And then it was like climate action now. And I hate to be, this guy, but it's like, it actually also does really matter what that action looks like, because there is a neoliberal anti-worker way of doing it. I'm sorry to say it, but like we saw that, for example, in France, where they basically put, increasing gas taxes on workers. I mean, you're putting the costs of this, industry that has damaged the planet, and the kind of cleanup or, the cost of that on workers. And two, it makes this absurd calculation that I think Huber lays out really well in his books, Climate Change is Class War, and also in some pieces he's written at Jacobin and Catalyst, is that, there's also this kind of neoliberal fascination with market prices, where it's like, if we get the right price for electricity and gasoline, then these systems will, sort of regulate and fix themselves. And sorry, friends, like that, it ain't that easy. Yeah, I mean, it's a really weird situation that we're in right now, because there is a significant investment in wind and solar from, the private sector. And we don't want to set up a system where we're relying on the same kinds of people, frankly, when we don't have to go down that path, and we could build something that works better for people.
Yeah, I think that's so important, that we're going to go through energy transition. That's happening. It's going to continue to happen. But do we want to be stuck in this situation where the public depends upon energy? The environment will be impacted by this energy, but a handful of private interests are actually in charge, who own it, who control it, who profit from it. And I think that's the rub that, a lot of the conversations miss. Is oil is bad for the planet and for the climate. Yes, that's true, but it's not so much oil is not sentient, right? I mean, it's owned by human beings.
Right.
And it's the private ownership of our energy system, and the private ownership of the profits that come from that, and the power that they have over it. The power they have over our power. I mean, that's the fucking problem. And I think there is a way to address this in a different path forward of, and I say different, but really harken back to the TVA as an example. I like that you threw that in there, because we do need large-scale public power.
Right.
And we need to be able to go in good faith to folks who are coal miners or who are working on oil wells and say, we're not going to take your jobs. You're going to have jobs that'll actually be better. You should suffer no drop in your working conditions. You should not suffer a drop in your pay. You should be able to have a good union job moving forward. That, and we see that from time to time when we talk about the coal miner strike, and folks will just be like, oh, well, who gives a shit? They should just find a different job. Coal's going away. Well, that's not the answer. It's certainly not the answer if you're one of those miners. But it's really not the answer for any of us.
And like, I mean, I totally agree. And like, in the moral case is there, right? And like, there's two quick aspects. Like, there's the moral case. It's like, I don't know, not to get too rosy-eyed about this, but like again, if we imagined that, for a second, where it wasn't true that, continuing to burn off fossil fuels was like harming the planet, right? These workers would be celebrated as the people who keep the lights on and like do like the most dangerous and necessary labor. And I think that, also having that respect, it's like, yes, the system is messed up. We want to move to using different kind of materials to power society. But like, these people do incredibly socially necessary labor, right? So that's like the moral point. The political point is that a lot of people, and I think it's probably true in Alabama as it is in, other places where there's these kind of extractive industries, they blue collar working class folks, they look at these jobs as like really great ways out. Like if you don't have a lot of other options, like, and look, it doesn't even matter how true it is. It's like that mythology is just there. And that is why it does hold such a, it's such a powerful idea to sort of, keep voters in line with like Republican it is why like Ted Cruz can do nothing for workers except say he's going to oppose, Green New Deal policies, right? So what we need to be doing is providing a better vision because we can, that could create, a really huge swing in politics to our benefit. But that's the political and the moral case. This is like the technical case too, that I think oftentimes gets understated and is a huge problem with the NGO and even a lot of left, socialist movement, movements around, climate change, Green New Deal stuff, is that these are also workers who have these skills and know how to run a power system and know what is necessary. We should be wanting them, one, for the moral reason, for the political reason, but also because we actually really need people with that kind of expertise and skill to be doing these kind of jobs in the future. I really like, some of the pushes that we've seen, particularly around nuclear, where it's there are a lot of one-to-one jobs that you can sort of transition some coal workers into doing, work with nuclear plants. And that's just one example, right? People who do power production across the board, these people have expertise, one, just on the technical, mechanical side of actually producing it, and two, of saying, this is what a power system needs to look like. And that's been unfortunately very absent, I think, in a lot of the movement too, where it comes from very well-meaning folks who want to make a better world, but also sometimes you need to talk to the folks who know what power production looks like, know what that responsibility feels like. If you want to be building plans that make sense, and so unfortunately, I'm no expert on these kind of things. I rely on other folks, and I'm trying to humbly request other people do the same thing, frankly.
Right.
Is that a lot of the plans that we even see from the left, unfortunately, have pretty apparent fundamental issues with what that system would actually look like in practice. And the only way to get that kind of positive feedback or whatever is to be incorporating the labor movement and the experts into your policymaking, instead of people who are coming out of the NGO world, which has a limited horizon in its understandings of a lot of these systems.
Yeah, and I think if your theory of change does not involve building worker power, what are you doing? Because I think that's so important, that the workers in these industries absolutely have to be involved in any of this policy discussion. And the more powerful they are, the better able we all are as a society to take on such a powerful industry. Because to your point earlier, I mean, the fossil fuel oligarchs are so powerful. I mean, it goes well beyond what most of us in most industries would even deal with. The power that they have on a truly global level.
Right.
These are folks who can overthrow governments and have.
Yeah.
So, if we're not actually building power at the point of production, we're already, outgunned and outmanned.
No, because that's the only force that's going to be able to, to shift them, is if the oil and gas workers are sort of shutting down production, for example, because we don't have the money to beat those guys, and unless we have a political power to do that, we'll be, Biden's been pretty whiny. I mean, I love the point that y'all are making, and I know that it was a call from USW too in the Beaumont lockout, is that the federal government should do no contracts with them until they end the lockout, right? And Biden sort of forgets and moves on, but in that context, then it's okay, well, the only thing we can do is leverage that power, because we do need to decarbonize fast, and to meet that challenge, we need to have the most powerful weapon in our arsenal, which is labor power. Absolutely. I mean, I do just want to say too that there has been a really significant shift, I think, in one, a lot of labor movement folks and labor movement affiliated organizations in trying to push for these kind of policies, which I think is very encouraging. I also think, as critical as I am of the NGO left, that they have started to incorporate calls for things like worker justice, but I'd like that stuff to get a little bit more concrete than because they call for justice for a lot of things, and I don't doubt their sincerity, but it's just it needs to be a bit more concrete if we want to actually utilize that power and effort.
Yep, absolutely. David Griscom, The article is "The Limits of Liberal Climate Policy" in Jacobin magazine. We appreciate your time, David. Is there anything else that you wanted to make sure that you hit on before you headed out?
No, check out the article. You can always listen to me and Matt talking about the stuff on Left Reckoning, and I really appreciate. I always really appreciate being on here with y'all. The Valley Labor Report does incredible work. I always rep my hat proudly, y'all.
Thanks. We really appreciate it. And by the way, I really dug the Lenin letter to American workers video.
Oh, thank you.
Recently, that was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's a really fascinating one. I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah, and I enjoyed y'all's tribute to Michael Brooks, both on Left Reckoning and on the Majority Report. We actually, right after his passing, it motivated me to do a big special episode on Bolivia. We hired some translators. We talked to a 30-year coca grower, the president of the largest labor federation in the largest city in Bolivia, about the coup, about labor's response to the coup. We talked to some academics, some reporters from Bolivia, did a big thing about it, spent a lot of money. Spent a lot of money doing it, but I think it was worth it.
Totally. Oh, that's really wonderful to hear, y'all. Yep. All right, friends. Well, take care.
All right, brother. Yep. Have a good one. Like we said, that was David Griscom. You can read his article in Jacobin magazine, "The Limits of Liberal Climate Policy." Just want to plug before we head out, the United Mine Workers that are striking here in Alabama have a school supply drive. They've got a school supply drive. I'm going to drop it in the chat in Facebook and YouTube, and you can make sure you donate if you've got some. If you've got some extra money, they would appreciate it. We want to make sure that their kids have just as good school supplies as the Scabs kids. So want to make sure that we're able to send them to school here in the fall with everything that they need. Also wanted to read some texts that we got during the show. We got one text from an 860 area code. Said, "My granddaughter's middle school drama club is required to use Disney-owned shows. She lobbied for and won Newsies. She wanted to have a show."
Sweet.
Yeah, what is Newsies? Do you know what Newsies is?
Yeah, Newsies is a musical from back in the day. I think, Christian Bale may have been the main star, like a very, very young Christian Bale. But yeah, it's about the paper boys who went on strike.
Ah.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, she wanted to have a show that had a more meaningful message than princesses that needed saving. Very good. When she's with me, we watch the Valley Labor Report, Majority Report, the Young Turks, etc. Proud to see that my Yankee socialist ways are having some impact on her thinking, because her grandpa is an oath keeper. Holy shit. And her father, while not as radical, is a very conservative Republican. God, an oath keeper. Wow. That's Looney Tunes. But glad she's listening. We appreciate your support and her support, and maybe you can send us like a clip of her doing the Newsies thing if you want. That would be cool. We'd love to play that.
It's loosely based on the Newsboys strike of 1899 up in New York City. Not a lot of Disney pro-union content out there, but that's one of them. So
that's
really
awesome.
Cool.
Got a text from a 309 area code. Austin from Huntsville here. Just wanted to take a moment and boost the Week of Action events starting in Atlanta today, led by Defend the Atlanta Forest and Stop Cop City Movement. Solidarity. Brassfield and Gorey, the general contractor for the Atlanta Police Foundation's Cop City project, has an office located right here in Huntsville. Activists have already coerced former prime contractor Reeves Young into dropping their contract with the APF, hoping to see Brassfield and Gorey do the same. That would be pretty cool. We'll have to check that out.
The Week of Action, could you tell me again what the title was, like, or what organization?
Just wanted to take a movement and boost the Week of Action events starting in Atlanta today, led by Defend the Atlanta Forest.
Okay.
And the Stop Cop City Movement. So maybe folks should check that out.
Cool.
Sounds cool. Yeah. And that's going to be it for us today, folks. We appreciate your time. If you want to support the show, you can pre-order our new shirts. Let's show them it on the stream one more time. Pre-order the shirts that say join a union or the boss will get you. You can buy our hats. You can give us money all at tvlr.fm. Become a patron at patreon.com/The Valley Labor Report. Follow us everywhere you follow things. And until next week, all power to the workers. Oh wait, what? No, wait. One more thing. I wanted to read this from the Facebook chat. What's up, guys? From Austin. I remember you talking about being a stagehand, Adam, when talking to me. Never knew it was a union. I love that. Austin is one of your students over there in Oakmont. So
yeah, former student, just graduated. So gonna be sending him a message today and maybe point him in the right direction of some good labor work.
Yep. All right. See you folks later.
Bye, y'all.